Good morning, colleagues and friends. Welcome to the University of California Campus Safety Symposium Part 2. My name is Liz Hollema, and I am the Associate Vice Provost and Chief Policy Officer for Graduate, Undergraduate, and Equity Affairs at the University of California Office of the President. I'm also chair of this symposium's planning team. I'm delighted that you have joined our collaborative dialogue on the future of campus and community safety at UC. Before I introduce our first speakers, I would like to go over the agenda for today and some housekeeping notes. This detailed agenda is on our website, shown at the bottom of this page. But here are the key sections in the timeline for today. We start with opening remarks by Chair of the UC Board of Regents, John Perez, and UC President Michael V. Drake. Next is a student-led symposium featuring some guest panelists. Then I return to provide a summary of updates from the UC Campus Safety Task Forces. After a short break, we have our next panel on some of the themes that emerged from the February 2nd session of the Campus Safety Symposium. This panel will talk about reconciliation, data transparency, and accountability. Then we will break for a virtual lunch, followed by our third panel on re-examining roles of police and other personnel. We will end with a closing activity and remarks from President Drake. Now, let's go over some housekeeping notes. For those of you who are in the Zoom webinar, the chat will be turned off. But the webinar is also being live streamed at the UC Office of the President YouTube channel, and it is also closed captioned. In the event that there is a disruption to our webinar or connectivity, please log back in using the webinar link you used earlier this morning. So let me introduce our first speaker. Regent John Perez is chair of the UC Board of Regents. Regent Perez has had a long and distinguished career in public service. He's a former member of the State Assembly, California State Assembly, representing downtown Los Angeles and East LA, and he was a longtime speaker of the California State Assembly. Regent Perez will be followed by UC President Michael V. Drake. Please join me in welcoming Regent John Perez.
Thanks, Liz. Good morning to everybody, and thank you for taking part in the second symposium on UC campus safety. We had an outstanding discussion in February, and I hope today will be equally valuable as we work to forge a path forward. I want to start by sharing just a few things that have happened in our state and our nation since our first symposium. 10 people were shot and killed in a grocery store in Colorado on Monday, marking America's 7th mass shooting in 7 days. The dead included a police officer who arrived on the scene to help. 8 people were shot and killed in Georgia, 6 of them Asian women, and local law enforcement was seen as dismissive of the motive and solicitous of the killer. The first trial in the killing of George Floyd began amid potential attempts to use the city's civil settlement as an excuse to avoid criminal justice, and word that the ex-officer on trial might have pled guilty, but William Barr blocked the deal. Here in my hometown of Los Angeles, a 101-page report was released describing failures of the LAPD in how they handled protests over the killing of George Floyd last summer. And this is a report that's worth all of our attention. The report said that the same failures noted in this report have come up over and over and over again, going back to and before the Watts uprising in the summer of 1965. In the state capitol, several new bills have been introduced in the California legislature dealing with excessive force, disclosure of records, and equipment at protests. An increasing number of individuals affiliated with law enforcement have been implicated in the attacks on the US Capitol on January 6th. Yet other officers, those who were killed and injured defending our system of government, were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. It's a good reminder that the fact that the vast majority of law enforcement, including UC law enforcement, are committed and responsible people. Throughout this process, we've heard and will continue to hear from students about their experiences with campus policing. As I shared at the first symposium, these stories mirror things I experienced as a student many years ago, as well as harmful incidents that have been happening throughout the university in the past few years. Like most of you, my views on public safety are shaped by my experiences with law enforcement, both good and bad. I'm someone who's been stopped and detained and thrown to the ground by law enforcement for no reason when I was a kid, and quite frankly, up until right before I was an elected official. But I'm also somebody who was rushed to safety as an elected official and guarded after credible threats were made against me. All of that context, along with the presentations we'll hear today, feeds into our ultimate goal, ensuring that all members of the UC community feel safer and more respected. I want to take a moment this morning to share my appreciation for the work of the task force, the work that the task force members are undertaking, and for the dedication of the UC leadership to create positive change. Paraphrasing someone I quoted last time, Justice Advocate Connie Rice, policies are great, but they don't get the job done if the culture doesn't change. I look forward to our discussion today on the themes that have emerged and potential recommendations and solutions that will emerge so that we can change culture. Last week, I had a discussion with a group of professionals whose jobs revolve around the Fredro Trio programs that help create opportunities for students like me. Students already faced great challenges to feeling welcome and safe at our universities. At one point, we talked about Archimedes, taking into account the different translations and additions over time. Archimedes is believed to have said, "Give me a place to stand and a lever long enough, and I will move the world." These symposia and the entire process provide a place for UC to take a stand. Together, we can build and apply that lever, and even if we can't move the world at once, we can certainly change our culture. And if UC can change our culture, then the world will take notice, and we hope take their own actions as well. With that, thank you, and I now turn it back over to you, Liz.
Thank you, Regent Perez. It's now my honor to introduce the president of the University of California, Michael V. Drake, MD. Dr. Drake is the 21st president of the UC system, returning to UC in 2020 after having served as president of the Ohio State University. Dr. Drake was also the chancellor of UC Irvine for 9 years, and he's a longtime professor of ophthalmology at the UCSF School of Medicine. Welcome, President Drake.
Thank you very much, Liz, and thank you, Chair Pettis. I appreciate your comments. I echo them. They are similar, as you and I have talked, similar to your life and mine have many similarities, and I appreciate the perspectives that you've shared, and particularly a reflection on the events of even these last few weeks and the great tensions that we have in our country. So thank you for that. Good morning to everyone. I want to thank you all for joining us for the second day of this symposium. This is very important work, and I really appreciate the interest and focus that so many people across the university and others have given. Broad community engagement gives us the best chance of achieving a meaningful outcome. In particular, I want to recognize our student participants on the Symposium Planning Committee, Naomi Riley and Naomi Waters, who both represent UC students in different capacities. Student voices are and have been critical to this conversation, and we look forward very much to hearing from you at the next session. I also want to thank the other UC community members and partners from a variety of backgrounds who are joining us today for this important discussion. I won't name everyone, but we appreciate all of your input. This is an extraordinarily complex issue. And as we dive into today's work, we're cognizant once again that the community members each bring a different perspective and experience to the conversation. We know that different people can have very different understandings of and have very different relationships with police. The feedback that we received from February session reflected that diversity of thought and experience. We're here to process what we've heard with respect and care and to do all we can to find a way to move forward. I've appreciated also the conversations that we've had with members of our community over the past several months about what campus safety means and what it should or could look like. I've heard numerous stories from staff and students about past experiences with police, both on and off campus, in which they felt or were harmed or felt frustrated. I want to acknowledge that those experiences and perspectives are important and assure you that we are listening, learning, and committed to real change. As Regent Chair Pettis and I have said, we've each experienced these things multiple times ourselves. I want to stress again that this process has no prescribed or predetermined outcomes. We know we want to make things better. We don't know exactly what that should look like. We don't know exactly what the finish line would look like, or really if there is a finish line, this is a process forward. But I do think we're all guided by the same desire to create a safer, more respectful university community for all members of our community. Our campuses represent home for so many of us, and we all want and deserve to be safe, to be respected, and to be treated with dignity in our own homes. Too often these needs, respect and safety, are in opposition to one another because of the history of policing and the experiences that many people, especially those from Black and Brown communities, have had. My view is that these two needs can be met, must be met, and must be met simultaneously. The question, of course, is how? And that's why we're here today, to talk about what solutions look like, what are the dimensions of change, not just incremental change, but really fundamental, long-lasting organizational and cultural change. After our discussions today, we will continue to take in feedback. We will begin drafting a set of recommendations that will be shared with the UC community. Our goal is to issue an action plan this summer to inform campus plans that will be implemented in the fall. We want to act swiftly, but also with great care and forethought. This process allows us to use our collective voice and wisdom to envision the future of campus safety and policing at the university. Your earnest participation will help ensure that we can achieve the transformative change our community needs and deserves. So thank you again to all those who are thoughtfully participating, contributing, and helping to guide us toward a better tomorrow. I look forward to our discussions. Thank you, and Liz, back to you.
Thank you, President Drake and Regent Pettis, for your welcoming and encouraging remarks. We are now ready to move to the next portion of our agenda, which is a student-led discussion. If you were participating in the February 2nd symposium, you came out leaving that we all realized that student involvement was a key theme that emerged. In fact, there was a sense that we did not have enough student involvement. So in today's event, we wanted to lead with student voices and student perspectives. So I'm very excited and privileged to welcome Aiden Aris-Sossingham and Gwen Coder, who introduce this portion of the agenda. Aiden, Gwen.
Thank you so much, Liz, and thank you, President Drake and Chair Perez. Good morning. My name is Aiden Aris-Sossingham, and I serve as president of the UC Student Association. For 50 years, UCSA has fought for the voices and values of students, and for just as long, we have fought to truly reimagine campus safety. 50 years ago, UC students were on the front lines of movements for social and economic justice, just like they are today. And on the opposite sides of those lines, legions of campus and local police who brutalized those who claimed they served, an image seared in the memories of students past and present from LA to Santa Cruz. The problem of over-policing at UC and in our communities is not new, and students, faculty, and staff are justifiably tired of discussing the problem every few years with only Band-Aid solutions on the table. This symposium asks us to think bolder, to think and to ask what solutions look like to truly re-envision campus safety from the ground up. Here in Los Angeles, those solutions have been out there for decades. Following the 1965 Watts Uprising, the resulting McCone Commission urged a redefining of public safety away from over-policing to invest in community food, housing, healthcare, and education programs. Following the 1992 Los Angeles Uprising, the resulting Legislative Commission urged the exact same thing: strict police accountability and an emphasis on reinvestment in community basic needs. And following the events of this past summer, abolitionist scholars and activists from Black Lives Matter to Measure J to the Divest Invest Collective have elevated the same fundamental solution, shifting resources and investment out of policing and into community support. The solutions to the problem we are here today to address are out there. They're in our communities, they're in our campuses. Over the next hour in this student-led discussion, you'll hear from students elevating the solutions that point towards both specific system-wide policy changes and campus budgetary reallocation. You'll also hear how these student-led solutions dovetail with ongoing leadership from state, system-impacted, and union partners. The solutions to our problem are out there, but we must have the courage to listen to the system-impacted students, scholars, and activists who are leading right now and act on their vision for the future. Because the University of California, with its residential campuses, its national labs, its health centers, its natural landscapes, and its integration with surrounding communities and neighborhoods, is a microcosm of both our state and our nation. And as we learned from the first symposium, what we do here at UC on issues of campus safety guides the state and nation for decades to come. So on behalf of the over 285,000 students who call UC home and are counting on UC to be a leader, I urge all of you to embrace the bold charge of this moment and dare to envision, imagine, and dream big. Because by the end of these symposium discussions, we have the opportunity to be either a mirror reflecting the failed status quo policies and thinking that have guided racialized over-policing for decades, or a window into a new and truly transformative view of campus safety that breaks from our past and lights the way to a future. It is time for UC to finally live up to its motto of Fiat Lux when it comes to campus safety. It is time for UC to light the way forward to a future beyond policing. Our moment requires it, and students demand nothing less. Thank you, and I'll pass it on to Gwen.
Thank you very much, Aiden. Good morning. My name is Gwen Coder, and I am the president of the University of California Graduate and Professional Council. We are here today to bring forward solutions that represent a re-envisioning of campus safety. Students have put together our vision to realize the goal of a safe campus for all members of our community, where they feel welcomed, wanted, and supported. Let me be clear. The student position is overwhelmingly abolitionist. This is not a radical position. This is not an uninformed position. Our stance is informed by the lived experiences of our community and by rigorous scholarship performed by faculty at our institution. It is a position that is shared by coalitions throughout the UC system and nationwide. Earlier this year, the UC system adopted a new framework for examining basic needs that went beyond just considering food or housing to integrating the entire ecosystem of basic needs that students need to have met to succeed academically. We have approached the idea of campus safety through a similar lens, asking what would need to change in order to ensure that everyone on our campuses could experience safety and security. The policy proposals that we put forward today are the actualization of our values, that we want to create a true community on our campuses that values the dignity of everyone who is a part of it, that supports and uplifts those who have experienced harm, and that creates an opportunity for all of our students to be safe and to succeed. We cannot claim to stand for equity while engaging in practices that disproportionately harm members of color within our community. We cannot seek to support students' basic needs or to close equity gaps without considering the negative impacts that the presence of uniformed and militarized police on campus has on the basic well-being of our students. And we cannot claim to uphold principles of community or justice when we ignore or downplay the valid concerns and criticisms that our students make regarding the presence of police on campuses. With that, I will hand over to our next speaker to get us started today. Naomi.
Good morning, everyone. Could we cue the PowerPoint? Awesome. Next slide. Good morning to our esteemed colleagues, students, staff, faculty, and the administration of the University of California. Thank you for lending your ears for this brief moment to listen to the students of the University of California. My name is Naomi Riley, and I serve as the student body president at the University of California, Los Angeles, and undergraduate chairwoman of the system-wide Council of Presidents. 54 years ago, in the same city that the University of California began and is headquartered, young, resilient Black college students made a calculated determination to stop the rampant police brutality experienced within their communities. Huey Newton, a UC Santa Cruz alumnus and co-founder of the Black Panther Party, articulated, "We want an immediate end to police brutality and murder of Black people." The demand and the need today is as simple as it was 54 years ago. And this in itself is an indictment of the failure to enact meaningful change through incremental reforms. The UC and other police departments have tried civilian review boards, body cameras, anti-bias training, implicit bias training, chokehold training, better training, more training, research, and more research. But none of these methods can get at the roots of policing. They cannot even begin to recognize these roots for what they are. The fact of the matter is, the institution of policing evolved out of slave patrols. Like slavery, it is not merely an imperfect institution that can be reformed. It is an inherently oppressive institution that must be completely abolished. To quote UCLA professor Robin D.G. Kelly, the abolition of police and prisons is not only possible, it is necessary. What we need, what students, faculty, and community members have been calling for decades, is a radical reimagining of public safety. This vision needs to do what policing has never been able to accomplish. It must truly serve the needs of all communities, especially our most marginalized. But as Professor Ruth Wilson Gilmore has articulated, abolition is about presence, not absence. It's about building life-affirming institutions. Building life-affirming institutions at the UC looks like investing in students' basic needs, as has been redefined by the UC. It means providing housing to each and every student at the UC, creating institutions that believe and support survivors in a way that transforms the harm that they experience. It means an increase in recruitment and retention efforts for our most marginalized communities. It ultimately means challenging our notions of criminality, punishment, and justice. Please turn the slide here. The most significant words in last month's symposium word bubble were abolition and abolish, followed by hopeful. I'm here today because I believe that the UC has the knowledge and the resources to answer these decades-long calls from its students, faculty, and staff. We urge this to not be the same kind of performance that the UC has put on in the past, in its convening of task forces to resulting in no tangible change for our most impacted communities. We must utilize our research, knowledge, and collective experiences to forge a new path, one that's led by students, faculty, and staff with lived experiences and identities that inform the way that they navigate the realms of campus and public safety. The University of California is a world-renowned institution. I'm proud to have been exposed to abolitionist theory for the first time in UCLA classrooms and student organizing spaces. In the upcoming months, the UC has a chance to put this theory into practice, to lead the nation in reimagining campus safety, to repair harm that decades of silencing and systemic racism has inflicted on our communities of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and to build a university that truly allows its students, staff, and faculty to thrive. Divesting from policing has been and will be the only way forward. Let's not waste this chance. Now pass it over to Naomi Waters.
I am Naomi Waters, Chair of UCSA's Racial Justice Now campaign. Thank you, Naomi, for your wonderful introductory remarks. As Ms. Riley thoughtfully articulated, incremental reforms are insufficient and as they are inadequate. These attempts at slow incremental changes places the UC administration squarely on the side of complicity. A university system complicit in empowering campus police with unbridled authority often exposes in the innumerable occasions of abuse. We call for a radical honesty throughout this process. We're all entitled to our own truths. However, we are not entitled to our own facts. Honesty requires not only a well-informed telling of history, as well as a well-informed process of infrastructure relying on facts. The university's approach has been imbued with processes that disallow truth, shirks justice, and clumsily approaches reconciliation. Too often, the voices of affected parties, students, workers, community are the worst dismissed and at best marginalized as isolated voices on a long list of task force, and think tanks. Next slide, please. Our campuses are subjected to outright brutality and abuse. UC can lead the way in its engagement in facts. Meanwhile, UC's police departments have been involved in numerous headlines that are plastered across our great state of California and across this nation. Police departments have been involved in, again, numerous flagrant acts of abuses of authority. This can be seen here and interpreted clearly through the myriad of litigation and current face of UCs, such as more incidents that have yet to come to light. Next slide, please. With this, we demand the creation of a vision and around campus safety that does not require a police presence. Students have boldly and amply supplied the system with one in the form of abolition, which we have laid out. Next slide, please. Safety comes from not the abuse of officers or use of force, taunts or threats, surveillance and punishment of dissenting voices. Safety comes from the form of reconciliation of harms, in histories. The racial profiling of 3 young Black children at UC Berkeley family housing in 2019 is not something I consider to edify the pursuit of campus safety. The sexual assault of a UCSB student by an officer on a campus, allegedly, to us, does not edify campus safety. Campus safety refers to the university's responsibility to create and maintain environments that nurtures optimum community development by assuring that campus communities are sufficiently housed, nourished, and provided for in the capacity of mental health, general health, and empowered with restorative justice initiatives. Campus safety is not policing. Rather, it is the variety of methods that universities can employ to ensure a hospitable campus for all, especially underrepresented groups. The next slide. Thank you. The next slide is in accordance with this vision. We believe at least 40% of officers on duty should be unarmed and thus designated to interact with the many nonviolent interactions UCPD has, such as those with students, demonstrators, protesters, and drivers of pedestrian and traffic stops. And within the next slide, we can see that we reject current MOUs. Naomi.
Next slide, please. So our third policy recommendation is the rejection of mutual aid to local police departments. We believe that on-campus funding, fees, and facilities should not be used to further injustice off campus. And what we're calling for is the elimination of mutual aid agreements with municipal and state police agencies. We can look here and the question becomes, why is this even necessary? And we can point towards the use of a UCLA lease facility, the Jackie Robinson Stadium, as an example of inherent anti-Black and state violence that was used and levied against protesters last year during the Black Lives Matter uprisings that were occurring over the summer. It's not enough to conduct a third-party investigation or to even pay lip service to those that have been harmed by these harmful actions. We have to take the tangible steps to ensure that these harms never happen again, and that means severing ties with local and state agencies that continue to abuse their powers. Next slide. Our fourth recommendation is also the promotion of data transparency and outcomes tracking. We know that it is no secret that outcomes tracking is a guiding principle of UC's public service and research missions, but this academic thinking has yet to make its way into our thinking around campus safety transparency. So what we're proposing, similar to what Gwen had mentioned in her opening remarks, is the creation of a public system-wide dashboard tracking police actions disaggregated by demographics. What this would do is track annual stops, arrests, incident reduction targets to monitor progress over time, and essentially do what we should be doing in promoting transparency and accountability regarding data. We also call for annual line item disclosures of PD budgets and participatory budgeting processes. I want to actually, before we move on to the next slide, I also wanted to highlight here that there are already student-led organizations like the No UCPD Coalition and scholars from different campuses across the UC that are already leading the charge in this work. And we are calling upon the UC to uplift, to learn from, and to even magnify their support for efforts that are already going the extra mile to make this data publicly available and also digestible for its audiences. Next slide, please. We are also calling for community-led accountability. The problem with community boards today, and even the task forces that we have today, is that they do not have any governance or authority over budgeting, hiring, firing, and operational decisions. If we are going to envision some kind of accountability as we make our way towards a world without policing, it is imperative that we have elected campus independent oversight boards, very similarly to what student advocates at Berkeley have been calling for years. We're also calling for UCPD to institute a sworn officer hiring freeze because, I mean, we are here reimagining the future of campus safety. It would only make sense that the police budgets and that the policing forces don't continue to expand as we rethink the very nature of whether or not we need them. And lastly, students, faculty, and staff must have a greater voice in future decision-making and police union contract negotiations. And I would say that that goes without saying. Next slide, please.
Yes, thank you, Naomi. Next, we will review a series of policy proposals that we believe can aid in the university in its request to create a more equitable, just, and secure campus. UCSA supports the following legislative recommendations. AB 48, which bans the kinetic use of force and chemical weapons on protesters. AB 26 supports officers to report instances of abuse and force and departmental abuse within the cumbersome whistleblower mandate. SB 16 allows for a greater community and municipal agencies access to the use of force records in full without redaction or stalling tactics. SB 16 is of particular importance to stem the movement of officers with abusive and even deadly past. The UC is not a haven for wayward officers. Next slide, please. And without further ado, we would like to introduce our key speakers for this panel that will be illuminating the issues brought forth today. Dr. Lande Jose, Higher Education Policy Advisor for the Governor. Azadeh Zarabi, Director of Underground Scholars at UC Berkeley. Michael Avant, Executive Vice President for ASPE 2399. And unfortunately, due to the timing change, Director Zarabi will no longer be joining us, a voice that will sorely be missed in this space, in this conversation. But first, we would love to go to Dr. Jose, if you will. I'm sorry, I don't see them populated. Oh, do you mind also sharing slides for now, please? Thank you. There we go. Hello, Doctor. Good seeing you. Could you speak to the finding of the Governor's Recovery with Equity report that the prevalence of, quote, racial injustice in higher education is a major barrier to student access and how that intersects with the issues with campus safety today? Thank you for coming.
First of all, I just wanted to say thank you to the students, to the University of California Student Association for the invitation this morning. I appreciate being able to be with you to talk about this really important topic. As I reflected on kind of the topic of this symposium and also the report, the Recovery with Equity report, it really had me thinking about what does it mean for students to feel safe, for students on campus to feel safe and to feel a sense of belonging. That is certainly for Black and Brown students. It could never be more prevalent than it is in this moment, than it is for Asian students. It is for women who oftentimes don't feel safe on their campuses. And what does that mean? What does it take? Sometimes it takes seeing people who look like you and seeing people who look like you in positions of authority so that you know that there is potentially some safety there. Sometimes it means seeing people who have had your same set of experiences. It can also mean having your skin color or your personage not draw attention to you in ways that might be unfavorable or unflattering. And certainly it means not being afraid. It means not being in spaces where fear is your primary feeling. When we developed the Recovery with Equity report, we spent a lot of time thinking about what it means to develop inclusive institutions. And really what we defined that as, and it was really developed in many ways with the strong voices of students. We ended up interviewing over 85 college students and several high school students as well, as we thought about what it means to develop this report focused on equity. We talked about the importance of culture change. And I wanted to mention that because I was listening to some of the specific recommendations, which I thought were very interesting and powerful. But I think as we think about these recommendations, as we think about possibilities for policy change, we can't think about all of those things without understanding the broader cultural change that has to accompany any set of recommendations, because without that culture change, the recommendations, the policy changes, the changes in practice won't stick. Because it really does require us to be thinking about the broader culture in which policies and practices endure. As an African-American woman, I certainly am very, very keenly aware of what it means to feel like I belong or don't belong. I reflect a lot on the history of chattel slavery in this nation, the legacy of Jim Crow, the new Jim Crow, the legacy of discrimination that is imbued in many of our institutions. And when I think about that, I think we need to examine all of those kinds of institutional structures to ensure that we're using them to actually create a sense of belonging rather than creating a sense of disenfranchisement. And so as you all are doing your work today, I hope that you all will be thinking about what does it mean to belong? What does it mean to belong beyond even policies and practices? But what does it mean to belong in terms of shaping the culture in ways that help UC students to feel safe, to feel heard, and to feel like there is a broader sense of belonging? So thank you.
Thank you. And would you mind answering one more question for us? How do you view the scope of campus safety, and why are investments in mental health resources and retention centers, if I can say that today, and investments in communities that have suffered harm on the part of that scope?
Yeah. So one of the aspects of the report that came out is and you spoke to it earlier today, the need to focus on basic needs and the need to redefine how we understand basic needs if we are a set of institutions, a higher education ecosystem that is fundamentally committed to equity. Certainly basic needs includes food and housing and security. That is, in many ways essential and at the core. We've also understood that it also includes digital equity, that if you don't have access to the internet and sufficient bandwidth, that's not equitable either. It also includes mental health services. And so as we think about what it means for students, again, to feel safe, to feel whole, to feel a sense of belonging, and to feel like all of their needs are met so that they can actually focus on the work of being a student, it does mean making sure that we're adequately providing for the resources for mental health services. I served as the chair of the California Student Aid Commission several years ago. And every year we would invite student groups to come and ask, share with us what their priorities are. And I was really taken aback one year when several students came to the Student Aid Commission, ostensibly to talk about financial aid. And what each of them asked for were greater investment in mental health services. It speaks to the prevalence and the importance of mental health services for our students. It speaks to the fact that in many ways, that sense of belonging isn't there for many of our students, and that we need to do a better job of helping them to both adjust to the environment. But again, it's about the environment and the broader culture adjusting so that students do feel like they have that sense of belonging.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time, and thank you for coming to the symposium. And next, thank you. And next we have Michael Avant, our coalition partner, AFSCME 3299.
Awesome. We are so excited to have you today, Michael, and we just wanted to ask you a few questions, giving your role with it as Vice President of AFSCME 3299, and also your role within the co-founding of the Racial Justice Working Group within AFSCME. So our first question for you today is, how would workers and students benefit from changes to current policing practices, specifically in the areas of police force accountability and decreased campus militarization?
Thank you, Naomi, for that question. But before I get started, I just want to thank the Students Association for giving 3299 the opportunity to let our voices be heard through this symposium. So first, I want to say thank you all for that. Let's just be clear. For workers in the campus community will most benefit from the dismantlement of UCPD. As we have stated in our resolution on police and policing at the university. But however, when we talk about accountability, I was a part of the task force set in 2017, which we had minimal voices from workers and the community, which the workers are workers that cover the campus from our bargaining units and the students, right? We had very minimal voices on that. But really, to take the recommendations captured in the 2019 report, right? And also to follow up on an instance of racism and language discrimination and workers detained by the police from the workplace.
Thank you for sharing that. And you kind of talked about it a little bit, but unfortunately, sometimes workers are invisibilized in campus safety discussions. What has been the experience of workers as it relates to campus safety? And what lessons can we take away from this reimagination of campus safety?
Yes, well, number one, just policing at our strike lines and labor actions, right? Police not actually protecting us in the face of threats by management and agitators, right? Also, very, very high intimidation, excessive presence at these strike lines and labor actions.
Right. Thank you. And is there anything else you would like to share with us? I mean, in terms of like your reimagining of what does it look like for AFSCME 3299 being involved in these conversations?
Right. But just to add on to that, we have had particularly run-ins at UC Santa Cruz, right? In the instance of racism, language discrimination, resulting in just people just feeling very vulnerable by being in the workplace at the university, right? 3299, we're the largest union at the university, which our workers represent. Well, our workers represent the university, but also that we're people of color, right? And 80% of people of color, 60% of those which are immigrants, right? Our workers are vulnerable to the state violence and encounters with the police. Folks who have their presence on campus questions in and out of uniform. Folks can be getting off of work, going to their cars, and perceive by the way they look or why they by the way they look and why they dress, the way they dress, as aggressors or agitators when they're just normal workers and students, right? Folks have been called out by the UCPD from just basically their language and how they speak, right? The UCPD escalate situation where members have sought their support, right? Meaning our workers want to feel safety when they come into work, and so as students, right? But that has not been happening. The intimidation by the UCPD, just by the color of their skin and how they speak.
Well, thank you so much, Michael, for sharing with us your perspectives, the perspectives of the folks within ASME 3299, and just for being here today to engage in these really important conversations. We look forward to working with you as we envision a campus without police and policing. And again, thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Naomi, I'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you, Naomi. Do you mind queuing the slides back up, please? Slide 13 specifically. Thank you. So again, thank you to each of our guest panelists. In light of these considerations, these considerate and sobering remarks, excuse me, and furthering the conversation, we believe for the UC to truly commit to reimagining campus safety from a student and community values driven lens, it must match its values and commitment in budgeting and resources. This is the student's budget. Next slide, please.
To put it clearly, we are calling on the University of California to follow the leads of student movements everywhere to defund the police and invest in its communities. From Oakland to the most recent announcement by Students Deserves efforts to get LAUSD to divest $25 million from school policing and invest all of the money into support services for Black students. In 2019 to 2020, the UC campuses spent $136 million on policing alone, while key programs continue to go underfunded. As I said before, in order for us to truly envision what campus safety must look like, then we have to take seriously Dr. Ruth Wilson Gilmore's claims that abolition is about presence, not absence. And we have to look towards community-led organizations like the People's Budget LA, who have articulated a vision for safety that invests into its institutions, that breathe life into communities like housing, food, childcare, education, etc. So what we'll be presenting in the next slides is an array of priorities that we believe are really important and that we believe that we can use this funding to achieve campus safety from a holistic perspective and also helping reduce the perceived need for policing. Next slide, please. So we're calling for reimagining campus safety, which requires reinvestment. And these are some of our reinvestment around these key priorities. We believe that the UC must invest in addressing the root causes of student insecurity, which include improving student mental health support, combating student homelessness and homelessness at large, addressing undocumented student hunger, supporting foster youth and system impacted students, and then scaling restorative justice initiatives. I also want to be clear too that this is by no means an exhaustive list of areas that are either directly related to or even tangentially related to the mission of creating a safe campus and a world without police. Next slide.
Thank you. We must improve UC's mental health resources. Some portion of CAPS hires should be able to support these efforts. Currently, as it stands, There are so few counselors and psychiatrists per student throughout the system. We call for the proactive investment in the form of fostering better healthcare outcomes for students. Puppies during finals week are great, but a more consistent and sustained approach would be better. Next slide, please. Clearly, we must combat student homelessness. Student homelessness of students report being over-policed and are some of UC's most vulnerable populations. And in this discussion, as we center dissenting voices and folks who are most vulnerable to issues of policing, we must not forget housing insecure folks in this conversation as well. Next slide, please.
We also believe it's important to address undocumented student hunger. I mean, hunger at large is a problem, but specifically focusing within the undocumented student community. Undocumented students are still remain ineligible for SNAP benefits, and they also face heightened food insecurity. And we believe that the UC can step in to help. We also know that undocumented students have historically faced harm from law enforcement agencies because we know the connections between policing and ICE, and also the prison industrial complex and the immigration industrial complex. And those connections cannot be divorced from one another. We believe that creating a UC in-house food subsidy program for needy undocumented students can address underlying hunger issues. We also, again, just want to reiterate that student hunger in itself is a really important priority. Hunger within the UC, in itself is a really important priority, and we should not be criminalizing those priorities and needs for basic needs. We should be prioritizing them monetarily, fiscally, in our thoughts and in our actions. Next slide. We are also calling for supporting our systems impacted and foster youth students. It is no secret that system impacted and foster youth have directly faced harm from campus and community carceral institutions. It is time that we direct our support to these communities and help redress past harms. What this looks like tangibly means addressing that their retention and graduation rates for our underground scholars are not on par with our other counterparts. In order for us to actually counteract these harmful effects of the criminal justice system, we should join in on the calls that they are making to the UC to be particularly attentive to providing resources, resource centers, and networks for these underserved communities. Unfortunately, Azadeh wasn't able to kind of talk to what underground scholars are currently facing, within the realm of policing and surveillance on campus. And hopefully some of our underground scholars who are in the later panels can talk about that. But we want to address this as one of our foremost priorities, because it is not possible to talk about policing and systems of incarceration and surveillance without addressing students that are currently being impacted and harmed. So yeah, next slide.
As we move forward toward our goals of abolition, the principles of restorative justice are what we believe potentially to reconcile past harms and support the creation of empowering frameworks. We must recruit, hire, and instill these practices throughout the UC, not only within our policing systems, but at large. We must provide grants and fellowships to undergraduate and graduate students conducting research on incarceration, policing, and justice within this realm. Next slide, please. The frequent inefficacies of UC's task force response systems are cause and evidence as to why we need rapid, swift, definitive change. We must not settle for long delays in this change. Neither must we succumb to allowing the slow gears of bureaucracy to all but permanently disable this progress. And as you can see, we have plainly laid out our policy changes and budgetary reallocations. Next slide, please.
In closing, we urge all in attendance who are viewing today to hear the calls that we, as the University of California Students Association, UC Graduate and Professional Council, the System-Wide Council of Presidents, and so many more have reiterated and clearly delineated as our official student demands. As mentioned before, We are not asking for the recommendations of the system-wide task forces and policing task forces in 2012, 2013, 2018, and 2019 to be adopted or pursued. We know that more training, increased armament, better body cameras, police observer programs have done next to nothing to address the systemic violence that has disproportionately impacted Black, Indigenous, and people of color at the UC. To pursue these as legitimate solutions is to ignore the decades-long calls for transformative justice and an end to policing. It is to say that we can fix a system that is operating as was intended in its creation. To walk away from these conversations and pose listening tours, toothless task forces, and use of force policies as solutions to systemic anti-Black and police violence is to deny the realities of those who have lost their lives to state violence and those who remain threatened by the spectacle of death. As Doctors Angela Davis, Robin D.G. Kelly, and Melina Abdullah have articulated at the beginning of the year, and I quote, "We invite the university public school systems in California and around the country to recognize this moment and step into it with a new vision. 2021 presents us with the horizon of abolition, and I invite you all to join us in that journey." Thank you.
Aiden, Gwen, Naomi, Ande, Michael, thank you for taking time out of your day to add your insights on this important issue. We are so grateful for your participation and for your commitment in making meaningful and positive change for UC. We're now going to take a brief pause as we transition to the next portion of the agenda. As many of you already know, last fall, President Drake asked each campus chancellor to form a task force on campus and community safety. This section of the agenda provides an update of the work of those task forces. Next slide. During part one of the symposium, February 2nd, through our Jamboards and word clouds and breakout discussions, we identified 7 themes to address as part of today's part 2 event. Those themes are formulating a definition of campus safety, re-examine the use of police and or other campus personnel, reconciliation and addressing past harms, increasing student involvement, as well as an involvement of faculty, staff in the campus community, accountability through accountability boards, review boards, and so forth, and transparency and access to data. 1 week after the February symposium, the UC Office of the President asked every campus to provide President Drake with updates on their safety task forces by responding to questions on each of these thematic themes. We also asked them for data in a standard template, and we asked for their preliminary recommendations for areas where system-wide guidance might be useful or necessary. All the campuses responded to our inquiries. Over the next few minutes, I will provide a very high-level summary of the campus responses. As we review the campus updates, which are also posted on the symposium website, please take note that every campus is at a different stage of development. A few campuses already submitted plans or proposals for community input, where others are forming or reforming their task forces now. This means that some of the ideas you see have been discussed and vetted numerous times, while others are nascent proposals. I also want to emphasize that the examples you see are campus examples. They do not represent a consensus of all the campuses. Next slide. We asked each campus to provide their definition of campus safety. And as expected, because campuses are at different stages of development, they are also at different stages of defining campus safety in concrete terms. But on the screen is one example from a campus that has developed a concrete definition. The terms underlined here in this example: belonging, safety, fairness, acknowledgement of historical wrongs, and equitable and respectful treatment of all peoples, also appeared in other campus definitions, task force charges, and in preliminary ruminations into this question. Ultimately, we will need to define campus safety as a system as part of the presidential plan that follows this symposium. Next slide, please. Here's what campuses had to say about the big topic of re-examining the roles of police officers and other personnel. One topic that came up repeatedly was rethinking the role of police in responding to mental health crises and student wellness checks. A few campuses talked about teaming mental health professionals with campus police officers or paramedics. Others talked in great detail about crisis intervention teams. Some campuses are considering assigning public safety positions into sort of a tiered organizational structure with clearly defined roles and duties, for example, for community service officers or public and safety ambassadors, and other roles for police officers. Another possibility is to form a campus safety division that addresses safety from a broader, more holistic perspective beyond policing and law enforcement. Other campuses talked about de-emphasizing certain kinds of enforcement, such as traffic violations, or having a different role around protest. And as we will get to in a moment, campuses propose using data and other assessments to inform decisions about staffing and resources that are specific to the campus location and needs. Next slide, please. As you recall from the February symposium, reconciling past harms was one of the points from the Yale Justice Collaboratory's 5-step policy action plan. From the Yale plan, these initiatives should, quote, recognize the dignity and victimization of individuals in their communities, redress and acknowledge violations, while aiming to prevent them from happening again. To move forward and build trust, campuses recognize that they need to address past trauma and harms through structural changes and through initiatives focused on reconciliation or restorative justice. A few campus examples to work toward reconciliation include outreach to historically marginalized communities through town halls and listening sessions, and integrating reconciliation into their campus anti-racism initiatives through training and other measures. Next slide, please. Coming out of the February event, we received very clear feedback of the need to increase student involvement and input in efforts to reimagine campus safety. Most campuses shared that they are already including students on their advisory boards and task forces. Some are also reported on holding focus groups and town halls with students in the campus community to listen to their ideas, concerns, and potential solutions. One campus has actually identified ways, including offering stipends, to further support students who participate on an ongoing basis on advisory or review boards, knowing that students are also students and have to take classes and work. Next slide, please. Accountability. All campuses have police advisory boards with clear charges as required by the 2019 Policing Task Force. Consistent across the charge of the various campus advisory boards were strengthening trust and communication where community members can provide input and influence decisions, identifying tangible solutions to improve the delivery of security and safety services. While all PABs are independent and can make recommendations to campus leadership, only 2 campuses have boards that review complaints about campus police. Overall, campuses seem committed to involving a wide breadth of community members, including students on search and hiring committees of police personnel. Although overall, there is quite a bit of variation on how communities members are currently involved in hiring and promotion and search committees. Currently, 2 campuses are accredited by the International Association of Campus Law Enforcement Administrators, which is considered as the gold standard for accreditation. Other campuses are either pursuing accreditation now or are interested in pursuing it in the future. Next slide, please. Following the February symposium, we asked campuses to provide data to inform today's discussion on data transparency and accessibility. As you can see on the slide, we asked for data on demographics about the UCPD. Who are they? Information about UC police actions, including stops, calls for service, and crimes. Complaints, information about complaints and use of force data, and staffing and budget information. Well, some campuses collect data, common data. Several campuses use different methods to define and report on their data. Often these methods are not aligned with each other, and they create apples to oranges comparisons. Therefore, unfortunately, aggregating any data into a system-wide view was not possible in time for this symposium today. However, as I'll talk about in a moment, we do plan to analyze this data immediately after the symposium. Next slide, please. Nevertheless, we did want to share an example of stop data by perceived race ethnicity from one campus. Again, this is a single campus example. Stop data refers to those who are being stopped and the perceived race or ethnicity of the person stopped and perceived by the officer who stopped them. Stop data will be required as part of the Racial Profiling Act requirement by 2023, but this campus has already collected data ahead of schedule. For this particular campus, some key findings I want to share with you. At this campus, there were 114 stops, of which 108 were made for individuals who are not currently affiliated with the campus. That means 108 stops were made of people who are not students, faculty, or staff. The top graph shows the racial ethnic background of those who were stopped and a percentage breakdown by race for all stops at this campus. As you can see here, whites made up the largest percentage of those who were stopped, followed by Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, Middle Eastern, South Asian, and then African American, Black. Because the majority of these stops were for non-campus affiliates, when we analyze the data in the future, we may want to consider comparing this kind of stop data with the demographics of the city or county of the campus location. In this particular instance, the county data shows that the white population is 46% and the Black population is 3%. It appears that the percentages of stops, though, for white individuals roughly matches the county population. But for Black African American individuals, it's slightly higher than their proportion of the county population. The bottom graph shows the origin of the 114 stops, distinguishing those from that were calls for service, such as 911 calls, and calls or stops that were initiated by a police officer. For this particular sample, over half of the 114 stops were initiated by a police officer. This graph illustrates how the data can demonstrate who is being impacted and from what origination. Not shown here, but available is information on the reason for stop, such as was a traffic violation, was there reasonable suspicion, and the result of the stop. Was there a citation, an arrest, or no action taken? This small example demonstrates that with a more comprehensive data set, we can learn a great deal about who is stopped by the UC police, why they're stopped, and the result of the officer's actions. More time to analyze, synthesize, interpret, and share, we expect to deliver insights that can inform campus safety, policies, policies, practices, and programs. And next slide, please. We asked all campuses to provide suggestions on what dimensions of safety and security should be determined locally, that is by the campus, and which should be determined system-wide by the, Office of the President or the system as a consensus. The slides here, the slide provides some of the preliminary considerations that campuses offered. Again, this was not every campus agreeing to this. It was some campuses making these suggestions. These considerations all feature details and nuances that require further scrutiny. However, we believe that these considerations can facilitate further discussions as we work toward viable solutions during our panel discussions today and in the next few months. Some items for potential system-wide determination include, as we discussed before, guidance on mental health and crisis intervention, better methods on data collection methods and reporting, and using that information to make needs assessments. Methods to reimagine campus security officers as public safety ambassadors or other forms of public safety officials. Pursuing the accreditation assistance across all campuses, potentially. And then engaging on this important conversation with the campus and community, even in non-crisis time. That is in an ongoing manner, annually and long-term. Campuses' responses on what should be determined locally include staffing ratios and the composition of sworn officers to consider the needs of the community that is specific to their location and their needs, as well as local specific training, location specific training, and programs to consider historical and geographical context. I'm going to wrap up my presentation now by thanking the campuses and the campus task force members for providing this information, for sharing their insights, for providing potential solutions and usable proposals. We're going to take now, we're going to move to our break. We're actually ahead of schedule for a little bit, so it gives you a longer bio break. We've heard a lot, we've listened a lot. Now let's take a lunch break, a coffee break to absorb what we've heard and what we've learned, and to take care of your own personal needs. We will return promptly at 11:30. So we've got a good break time here. Check your emails, get your coffee, and we'll see you at 11:30. Welcome back. I hope you all had a good break. We're able to check all your emails, take care of your business, feed the dog, get some fresh air. We're now moving on to the next phase of our symposium. And if you watch this February 2nd symposium, the next two people should look familiar to you. Lisa Gordon and Louis Michelson facilitated our panel discussion last month, and they're back today to facilitate our next two panel discussions. Lisa and Louis, it's good to see you again. Take it away.
Thank you, Liz. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Gordon, and as Liz said, Louis Michelson and I are back to co-facilitate two panel discussions for you today, focused on key themes that emerged from part one of the symposium, and also to highlight perspectives and ideas on reimagining campus safety. In a minute, my distinguished colleague, Louis Michelson, will be providing facilitation guidelines and more details about our panel discussions. As your facilitator, I am honored to share this virtual space with you today to provide an opportunity for all of you to continue the dialogue on the future of campus safety and the dimensions of change. Louis Michelson will now provide some thoughts on our role as facilitators, the purpose of the panel, and some guidelines. Louis?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. It's indeed a privilege to be here and as part of the symposium again. As facilitators, Lisa and I have a unique role to play today. We don't come here as subject matter experts or as persons with a personal stake in the outcome. We're here today to serve you, all of you, in a neutral capacity. Our job is partially administrative, keeping us on track, on time, and making every effort to use the time we spend together as effective as possible. But more than that, we hope to create an environment for these panel discussions that elicits empathy for each other, encourages thoughtful listening, respects diverse perspectives, and ultimately identifies potential areas and ways to channel all of the knowledge and passion that's being shared today into an actionable path. The two panels that will take place today may be a little bit different than what you're used to. The panelists were not asked to make presentations or have prepared remarks. Instead, the intent is for this to be an open dialogue. Lisa and I shared some questions ahead of time that we plan to use to prompt the conversations. But from there, we'll go wherever the conversation takes us. There will also be an opportunity near the end of each panel for questions. As facilitators, Lisa and I will work today to make it as meaningful for all of you as we can. And with that, I'm going to ask Lisa to introduce our first group of panelists. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Louis. I now have the privilege of introducing you to a very distinguished group of 4 panelists. They are Mr. Humberto Flores, graduate student at UC Riverside. Professor Jeffrey Raymond, professor of sociology and co-chair of the Police Advisory Board at UC Santa Barbara. Ms. Michelle Serven, undergraduate student, co-chair of the Underground Scholars Initiative, and co-founder of the No UCPD Coalition at UCLA. And Ms. Katie Tento, clinical professor of law, director of the Criminal Justice Clinic, and chair of the Public Safety Advisory Committee at UC Irvine. I hope everyone here with us today has had the opportunity to read each of our panelists' bios that were provided via the UC Campus Safety Symposium website. Each panelist will share their perspectives on 3 key themes: reconciliation and acknowledging the past, better data and increased transparency, and accountability. And then we will move into questions regarding ideas on possible short and long-term solutions. We will then follow with a brief Q&A session as time allows. During our panel discussion, if you have questions to help clarify something you heard during the discussion, please feel free to submit your question via the Q&A function. If your question is directed to a specific panelist, please indicate their name with your question. At the conclusion of our panelist discussion, we will pull from and pose some of the questions you have submitted within the time allotted and remaining. As we begin with our first key theme to make this panel discussion more conversational, all of our panelists have agreed to be addressed by their first name. The first topic and key theme for our first panel discussion is reconciliation and acknowledging the past. Let's start with Jeffrey.
Thank you for this opportunity. I really think that my co-panelists are probably in a better position to address issues of reconciliation. So let me just say a few things about what I think ought to be reconciled or should be concerned about. And that is that over time, policing logics have become increasingly disengaged from the communities they ostensibly serve. And the source and growth of this distance has a long history that's rooted in the ways that empowered communities have deployed police to maintain unjust social arrangements, particularly social and racial inequalities, and has been devastating for the communities of color subject to pervasive or hyper-policing. In addition, this trajectory has been exacerbated by a focus on officer safety grounded in dominance and threats of violence rather than a concern for legitimacy, parsimony, and context-sensitive policing. Because of this sustained disengagement, police department processes for hearing and responding to complaints about policies or misconduct rarely satisfies concerned community members or leads to positive change. Police departments dominate the process for adjudicating complaints and hold officers to standards that community members may not accept as adequate. And so I think we need to start with a concern for how we got here and acknowledging, registering, and responding substantively to the long list of injuries that has come out of this disengagement.
Thank you for your comments, Jeffrey. Can we now have Humberto? Could you please share your perspectives on reconciliation and acknowledging the past based on your insights, your experiences, and what you have learned?
Yeah, so good morning to everyone and thank you for having me. And as I pay attention to the question, it's really interesting, thinking about this term reconciliation, because reconciliation alludes to restoring friendships, right? And it's important to pay attention to the language. And is it a friendship that's being restored? And you also mentioned like acknowledging the past. So I believe that's really important because you got to acknowledge where the system of policing comes from. And as some of my previous colleagues mentioned, it is rooted in white supremacy and grown out of the system of slavery. So once you acknowledge that, you also acknowledge that it's a system that has grown out of anti-Blackness, has evolved. And then it is rooted in historical racial imbalance. So it's important to like re-examine and think about whether the people want reconciliation. Like, is that something that we've asked the student body, right? Whether they want, because from my perspective, I don't know if it's reconciliation what we need, but rather reparations. And therefore, like, it's difficult to reconcile the people, meaning the students, the faculty, the staff, with an institution. It's not that we're dealing with one bad cop, one bad apple. It's an institution that we're trying to reconcile with. So it makes it very difficult. So I'm not sure if reconciliation can be acquired or can be accessed, but I think we can definitely take steps and actions that will lessen the harm. I mean, all day in the panel, we've heard about the reimagining of public safety, and that's really what it's going to take in order to get past the harm that has been enacted by the institution.
Yeah, Humberto, that's right in line with the discussion during part one, because the past harms was always married to reconciliation. But I think you've opened up a very interesting concept here, which is, what does reconciliation in this context mean if it's not between friends? And I'm hoping the rest of you are going to help us figure that out over the next hour. So Michelle or Katie, what does reconciliation really mean in the context of policing and a university campus?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for also having me. I'm going to build off of what my colleague and friend Humberto was speaking on. I also believe there's no room for reconciliation at the UC level between UCPD and students. UCPD has harassed, arrested, and brutalized its very own students, workers, and campus community. As we spoke about earlier, the Jackie Robinson Stadium incident is a prime example of the distrust and power dynamic between the UC system and its affiliates. UC students and community members were detained, harassed, and terrorized for speaking up for the very values that the UC system claims to be rooted in. You would not ask for a trauma victim to reconcile with their abuser. And that is why I do not believe that the UC system will be both our saviors and our oppressors. Throughout this process, as a student in the UC system and an organizer and a community member in the LA area, I have learned that the UC has no interest to listen to student voices of those most impacted. We have invited UC officials to countless meetings and events, and time after time, they have not shown, or they have shown up and steer the conversation away from our needs. They have taken countless times of our meetings into introductions or community building questions when, as Beto mentioned, we really just need reparations and reinvestment in our resources. So I want to challenge that and question, why are we now being invited to an exclusive panel that has not really been marketed for students, for the student body, but rather towards officials and UC higher ups? And why are we now being invited to this to repeat what students have been screaming for years? Now the UC wants to co-opt the work that students and faculty have been putting in countless unpaid hours and display a performative act of interest by tokenizing our knowledge and our stance on these issues.
Thank you, Michelle. You know, it's interesting because I noticed during the student panel earlier that they didn't really use the term reconciliation. They talked about restorative justice. And I'm beginning to feel like that's what we're hearing here is reparations, and reconciliation may not even be the right term to describe what you all are looking for. So thank you for that. Katie, what would you like to add?
Well, thanks for having me. And I really want to underscore both Michelle and Umberto's points. I think reconciliation does seem to be the wrong word because it suggests that there is one pillar or one group that is okay. And that's what we're hearing from the community, that the pillar of policing on our campuses is not okay and is not acceptable. And we won't accept that as something that the others of us should have to reconcile with. So it strikes me that we're really at a moment of reckoning. And as Michelle said, it's important to recognize that many people have been calling for this reckoning for many decades, if not centuries. But so we're at a moment where if we don't take seriously the call for structural change, we're really just repeating the errors of our past. And I brought a quote because people in this work say it better than I do, but this is the Color of Change president, Rashad Robinson. And he said, "The system is not broken. It is operating exactly the way it was designed. And unless we can't implement." And I think that's a really important place to start, because if we can't acknowledge that the entire system is racially biased and premised on a history of as Umberto said, anti-Blackness and racist policing and violence against people of color, we won't make progress even if we call it a reform or we tinker around the edges. That's not true progress, and it's not grounded in the community that needs, that is calling for substantive change.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. I mean, I think that's what struck me when I was first asked to facilitate this was how do you separate or isolate the policing piece from the rest of the eco-culture, as campus culture that was referred to. I did notice, Michelle, you mentioned reinvestment, and that seemed to be a big part of the suggestions, the recommendations that were being made during the student panel. So if it's not reconciliation, either in terms of the concept or the word itself, what does, in terms of addressing past harms, move forward? Is it this reinvestment piece? Anyone?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what folks have been mentioning. It's divesting from the institution. Again, like we can't reconcile with an institution, the people in the institution. So it's gonna take divesting from like what folks have been saying all along, like in this panel, and for divesting from the institution itself and investing in basic needs. I mean, that's the solution that I see. It's that simple.
Okay. Michelle, do you want to expand upon your concept of reinvestment?
Sure. So at the No UCPD Coalition at UCLA, that's one of our main pillars, divestment and reinvestment. So as Beto was saying, this term reconciliation, it's like a friendship, and we don't want to sit around with UC officials around the table, hold hands and, talk about like what has been done and how we can move forward. That's not going to help our community. My peers are still going to be fighting food insecurity. They're still going to be fighting mental health issues. They're still going to be scared about cops harassing them on campus. So what is going to stop that? And that's going to be investing in those resources and taking away that money from these powers that are historically and currently hurting our community and show no type of effectiveness, which later on I will touch on with data and bringing up some of the work that we have done. But it's just been proven that our money and our budgeting is not where it needs to be. And that's how we can really reconcile with each other and really move forward, by giving our community and those most impacted the resources that they need.
Well, with that as a possible segue, Jeff, do you have anything you want to add to this before we move on to the next theme? Your mute is in.
I think they've covered it very well, so I'm happy to move on.
All right. This is gonna be
I was just going to say, any other additional short or long-term ideas or solutions anyone wanted to offer before we move into the next topic?
Sure, I'll just, I mean, I think that there are some immediate steps we can take, but I think ultimately the resolution for these issues is going to come from outside police departments, and it needs to be aimed at reducing or eliminating the need for police departments. And so I think that's why we need a broader discussion. I think we can focus on the interim. How are we going to manage what we have in place until we're able to reduce or eliminate the need for police? But I think that has to be the ultimate goal of our effort.
Yeah. Anyone else on shorter long-term solutions as it relates to reinvestment?
Yeah, I guess I'll just add that I think we need both short-term and long-term actions. That's something that our advisory group at UC Irvine has really centered on, because again, this idea that even short-term tinkering around the edges is unacceptable at this point, right? If we're not truly re-envisioning what public safety is and questioning whether there needs to be a police department, questioning what sort of funding, if any, goes to a police department, you know, you're not going to create lasting social change. So it needs to be a combination of short-term actions, but within the framework of defunding or abolition, or with the framework of the goals that the community decides are important to them, right? It's driven by each campus's community, really driven by the students at the forefront of that community. And those values have to dictate both the short-term and long-term solutions, but you can't just have short-term solutions. We won't work to create lasting structural change.
I noticed among the reimagining piece from the student-led part that some of them struck me as being potentially short-term actions that could be done, and others obviously were more in the long term. I think that's going to be a challenge, is figuring out which ones can be done that are meaningful, like you said, and not just the Band-Aid, I think, that was referred to. So Lisa, I think we can move on to the next theme. I think this is all going to weave into the next one.
Yes. The next theme is data. So what are your perspectives on better data and increased transparency based upon your insights, your experiences, or what you have learned? Who would like to start?
I can go ahead.
Great.
So I'm also a member of the No UCPD Coalition at UCLA. I was an undergraduate student at UCLA, graduated in 2019. And I'm involved with, well, we requested data before from the UCPD. So I kind of wanted to give a little bit of insight on that. And like, to simply answer the question, the data is difficult to access, and it seems that departments have not been as transparent. So we have submitted PRAs, public record requests, to the UCPDs, UCLA, UCR, and various other UCs. And the UCPDs are making it very difficult to access the data. It's not clear who to reach out to, like they don't have specific point persons. Many folks don't know the process of how to access the data. So it takes a certain privilege, like being an academic or being connected with academics that do know how, And an example is when we requested the UCR data, they were like not responding at first until we follow up. You know, the PRAs give them a certain amount of time allotted to respond to the request. So again, it goes back to like having the resources and us knowing and having to know people that are knowledgeable about the law to even get the data that has been so difficult to access. So there's a little bit on accessibility. And in terms of like transparency, like it's when they do provide the data and satisfy the PRA request, many of the times it's provided in the worst form, meaning it's difficult to navigate, it's difficult to process, and they also give like the minimum. They try to give the minimum amount of data requested as possible, and this is not like unique again to the UC system. It's been like this in the institution of policing for a very long time. I was also a member of the $1 Million Hoods Project when I was at UCLA. And I have a little bit of experience with knowing about how difficult it is to acquire data because, you know, we also requested some LAPD documents that were very difficult to access, and it took a lawsuit to access the data that is now being digitized and going to be in the future publicly accessible to people. So it's really important to like, you know, think about how to increase data accessibility and transparency to the department. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, Humberto, it strikes me that I think something again was mentioned about this during the student-led panel that it's kind of like the shoe's on the wrong foot. You're having to put forth all the effort. You're having to make the requests. And rather than it being the other way around, which is what I'm hearing is proactive data being shared and dashboards. And in other words, it should be easily accessible. It shouldn't take that much work to try and get your hands on. Is that what I'm hearing?
I wonder if I could jump in because I completely agree with Humberto about the inaccessibility of this data. And I really think that the PD should be collecting different sorts of data specifically to incorporate community perspectives and involve community members. So for example, every person contacted by the PD should be given the opportunity to give feedback on their experience. This is done in hospitals and other settings and has been demonstrated to improve a concern for community members' perspectives. Also, where there are concerns or complaints about police conduct, police should be releasing all the records gathered in and after these events, including video data. So the current practice of having dashboards and quantitative data gathered and processed by the PD stops on outcomes doesn't provide much insight into what actually happens, and a skeptical public reads these by filling in the blanks in the worst possible way. So releasing better quality data, the closer to a full rendering of the encounter, the better would encourage trust, provide a set of publicly available materials that community members could use to make judgments and evaluations of quantitative overviews, and would encourage public engagement and community responsibility. I think just getting numbers is not going to be a satisfactory way to approach these things because we know, I mean, anybody who works with numbers knows about Goddard's laws and these other kinds of things where, you know, once you use a set of numbers as a definition of success, they become unreliable. So we need the underlying kinds of evidence that we can use to make judgments about how well this is being done.
Yeah, Jeffrey, I think you've moved the conversation beyond just data to the transparency part of this theme. And that transparency is more than just numbers. You gave a couple of different really good examples of, you know, like individual kinds of contacts and what kind of transparency is around there. Michelle, Katie, what do you think about this transparency issue?
Yeah, so I just really want to highlight what both Jeffrey and Humberto were saying. I'm also part of the $1 Million Hoods Project, and I'm very grateful and blessed to have connections with Dr. Kelly Laro Hernandez, who issued that lawsuit against LAPD. And if it wasn't for those connections, we would not have access for this data, because when those police departments don't respond, we have to get our connections over at the law school to respond, hey, you're in violation of the Public Records Act. You must respond within 10 days to our request. And if we did not have those connections, this data would not be out. And just to show that we have been working with this data and these reports for months now, and the data is given, it's given to us in an image file. So we are given all of these reports in PDF forms. So if you know about data, you can't work with PDFs. You have to code the PDFs and make them into spreadsheets and then analyze that data. So it's a whole data issue of, it's so inaccessible and it just takes so much extra time to clean that data when there should be people within those departments already doing that. And just to move forward from the process aspect, I wanted to actually bring up actual data numbers that we have found, at least within the UCLA UCPD department. I really think this is a very important conversation. So I really recommend that you take out your pen and paper, and I really want these numbers to sit with you because they are very, very important. And first of all, also, I just wanted to say that bar graph presented earlier in the summary of campus safety updates that Liz presented earlier, I just want to say that that visualization is very dangerous because it was not put next to any demographic data and it's not giving the impact that it deserves. So in that bar graph, which is horizontal, it's hard to compare, and it shows that white population have the highest number of stops, but that is actually in proportion to the amount of white people in the UC system, if not lower. So that's why I wanted to bring up, at UCLA specifically, white people make up 36% of arrests, which is the highest number of arrests, but they are 56% of the population. So as you can see, they are being arrested even kind of at a lower rate than what they make up at the population level. Black people, this is the biggest one. 29% of arrests, 7% less than white people. How much of the population? 2% of the UCLA population, 29% of arrests. Latinx people, 22% of arrests, 10% of the population. Other, 14% of arrests, 32% of the population. So as you can see, these numbers are so disproportionate. 29% of arrests, Black people are 2% of the population. And to add on, the charges that people are being arrested for, the top 5 charges are non-violent, quote unquote, non-violent crimes. The top 5 arrests are warrants, DUIs, trespassing, public disturbance, and theft. Warrants being the #1 arrest. That is so, I want that to sink in with you because people do not walk around Westwood or around campus with a sign on their head saying, I have a warrant. If you're unfamiliar with the arrest process, someone has to stop you, meaning they profiled you. Hey, this person looks sketchy. This person looks suspicious. I'm going to stop them. Let me run their record. Oh, they have a warrant. Let me arrest them. They weren't necessarily doing anything wrong. They weren't necessarily doing anything considered violent. They were profiled and they were arrested for a warrant. And all of these other 4 charges, they're not necessary. They are things that can be addressed with community organizations and community systems of accountability, rather than a police department, which opens segues for violence and harassment. And just to close it off, the total bail collected has been 88 billion 90, I can't even say that number, 88 billion, and 18 million of that, almost half, has been Black arrests, Black bail. So half of the money that the UC system is making on bail is on that 2% of Black population. So I really want these numbers to sink in with you. And I really encourage all of you to submit those public records requests and make these statistics. You know, this is what people want. So yeah.
So a question I have is, let's say in this reimagined world that you have it, it's accessible, it's transparent, you don't have to ask for it, it's available, you don't have to have connections to get at it. How would you use that data?
I can take that. And can I just step back though? And well, I want to say that right? We're talking about data in two ways. One is access to data and transparency to data. And I completely agree. Our community shouldn't have to litigate to get our own data about us. I mean, that's just like a flawed premise that we should have to resort to litigation to get data. And the second prong is, what data are we collecting? And as Michelle brings up these important points, it's community specific understanding the data, right? You have to look at the composition of different ethnicities and different people and what crimes are being committed. And policing is very localized in that way. So I agree that we need a system-wide dashboard, but we also need community-specific dashboard.
Okay.
Two ways this more nuanced collection of data can help us. As Michelle was saying, the idea that you're arrested for an outstanding warrant suggests that there was, a high percentage likelihood of a racially biased stop in the first place. Because yeah, she's 100% correct. You don't know that a person has a warrant by looking at them. And you're probably making racist assumptions based on race. So we need to understand why people are arrested and what gives the police officer grounds to stop a person. So if we have data on who is being stopped and the grounds for why they're being stopped, we can look into these racially biased policing methods. We can also use it to make choices about how to divest funds from the police. We can look at this category, calls for service. Well, what makes up calls for service? Is it mental health struggles? Is it I'm locked out of my apartment? Is it I need a safe ride home, studying late in the library? Or is it I have a real fear of violence, or I'm at risk of abuse from a partner, right? We could have different responses that may or may not involve a police officer based on the nature of the call for service. So data about why people are being stopped, why they're being arrested, and data about what calls for service are, allow us to understand policing practices, and it allows us to make decisions about hiring, firing, promotion. It allows us to make decisions about divesting funds away from the police department, not hiring more officers, right? It allows us to understand what the police are doing with their time and allows us to make decisions based on that knowledge.
That's really helpful. I mean, I think you've already kind of talked about solutions in the sense of how to use the data. How does that help generate better solutions on the back end in terms of policies and procedures? So other aspects of how to use data as part of solving the issues.
I just wanted to, I think the points Katie's making are really important. And, one of the ways recordings have been introduced as a kind of panacea for a lot of these things, and they're important, but they don't solve problems on their own. It depends on how they're used, how they're gathered, and how police are required to justify their actions. And so one thing recordings can do is you require police to articulate the basis for a stop before they encounter the person, where that, in most cases, where that's possible. This doesn't give them the opportunity then to retrospectively fit a reason for the stop that looks good in terms of statistics, because they have to be able to articulate why they're doing what they're doing before they ever encounter the person. And just the need to do that can itself reduce the kinds of stops that Michelle and Katie are talking about. So I think researchers can also use more raw forms of information and data to significantly expand our understanding of policing practices in ways that police either may not be interested in currently, but may find an interest in if they're concerned about community perspectives, but that gives the community a chance to understand how it's being policed and its role in that policing.
Jeffrey, that's really interesting. Are there police departments that are practicing what you just suggested? Do you have results to show what happens?
I know that this is being done or was tried out in Seattle and Chicago, and in cases where police officers had to fill out a one-page form that justified reasons for stop, the numbers of kind of unwarranted stops, reduced considerably. A very small impediment is sufficient to actually curb a lot of bad behavior or a lot of exploratory behavior that turns out to be hugely detrimental to communities of color. So I think yeah, there are plenty of examples around where police officers or police departments are required.
Do any of the others, you have examples of where other police departments have instituted some of these things you're asking for and how it's worked, what the result has been? Or will you be mostly the first?
I don't think we should be afraid to be the first.
Okay.
I'm sure we're not the first. I just don't happen to have the examples on hand. But I'm sure there are a lot of places we could turn to that are doing more, innovative and nuanced work with data collection.
Okay. Anything else on this topic before we move on to the third theme? We're also trying to save some time for a Q&A period. I think we're good, Lisa. Let's move on to the third theme.
All right, so similar question. Here we are again with asking your perspective on accountability as it relates to your insights, your experiences, and what you have learned. So accountability, who would like to start us off in this discussion?
And accountability for whom?
This could, go ahead.
I'll jump in. So I think first we ought to think about what accountable to what and to who. And I think one of the first things we should be thinking about is reshaping the standards for police conduct and policies to bring them into alignment with community expectations. Communities should be setting the expectations for the police departments that serve those communities, and community members should be involved in judgments about how well that's going. I also think in the case of troubles and complaints that those should involve a focus on restorative justice, because the current framework that's being used is mostly about disciplinary outcomes. And that doesn't encourage any kind of useful learning or substantive change. The overriding concern is sort of whether some bit of conduct meets a threshold. And the process seems designed to sort of diminish and domesticate community feedback on what went wrong and what's happening. So a process where a department gathers evidence and then decides whether a threshold has been met is really going to disappoint one or more community members, and it's also going to leave a whole bunch of problems, completely unacknowledged and unaddressed. So if you have a focus on restorative justice, it enables officers and departments to learn and hear from community members, encourages them to understand their perspectives, and improve how they engage with the public, including how they recognize their own and others' racial biases. We should also incorporate community members' judgments in this complaint process. So it shouldn't be run by the police department. The community members who are concerned should be invited to register their feedback on how well this is going and how well they were heard, and collecting and publicizing that kind of data on the complaint process itself encourages or requires departments to start caring about community members' perspectives when they register those complaints. So disciplinary actions have to be part of this, and they should be taken where officers or departments fail to learn from these kinds of complaints or engagements, or they demonstrate a disdain or lack of concern for community members' perspectives. But I think what we need to be using these complaint processes to do is transform policing rather than focusing on disciplinary outcomes on individual officers alone. Although, of course, holding individual officers accountable is really crucial.
Yeah, that was one of the main points during the student-led was about community-led accountability. The other three, but what does that look like to you?
I wanted to add on to what Jeffrey's talking about the complaint process. So a lot of times when these incidents happen, we're asked like, why don't you go report it then? So that's like kind of the response. But I think that's very important to highlight because the complaint process, you have to submit a form in person or by mail. and then you are interviewed by an investigator. So as you can see, that's very inaccessible to houseless people, which are those that are most targeted, formerly incarcerated people who may not feel comfortable stepping into a police station, or just people with language barriers, transportation barriers. It's not an accessible process. And then from there, the complaint is determined, is read and assigned by the chief of police. So like Jeffrey's saying, it's an internal process. It's not, it's the people who are doing the incidents themselves deciding if they can sustain this incident or not. So the chief of police looks over it, and then it's investigated by a UCLA police supervisor. So at no point in time is this complaint read by someone who was actually there, a bystander, a mediator, a community member. And I just wanted to bring up how since 2016, the UCPD complaints are public. It's all public information on the website. And since 2016, only one complaint has been sustained. And that complaint is that an officer failed to take a report. And that's easy to prove because there's no actual report there. But all other complaints, such as excessive force, exceeding lawful authority, harassment, threatening, all of those are deemed unfounded or unsustained, meaning that they did not find a basis to accredit like that complaint. So I really want to just think outside the box into, like how you were saying, Louis, community-based forms of accountability. So at UCLA, we boycotted the PSAC, the Public Safety Advisory Council, which was proposed by UCLA, because this council does not have any actual power. They just want us to review, and basically we don't have any recommendation or actually hiring power or any actual policy change power within the UCPD. We just would review their actions, and in other words, legitimize the institution that is UCPD. So it's important that the people who are most impacted, meaning formerly incarcerated, system impacted, Black, brown individuals, are the ones that are keeping these police accountable. The faculty that are doing the racial work, that have done the research on policing for years, their whole lives, these are the people that need to be keeping them accountable, not the supervisors or the co-workers of the ones that are actually doing the harassment.
Jeff, I hate to pick on you again, but I do recall you're with one of the co-chairs of one of the task force, right? And I remember Liz Halama, when she was doing her little quick summary there, mentioned that topic of the makeup and the authority of these boards has been under a lot of consideration. What are you guys looking at your campus, if you don't mind me asking?
Sure. Well, I think the points that Michelle raises are really valid ones, and there's certainly concerns that I share as well. And I will only be on this board so long as I think that it can make a difference. And as soon as I see that it's simply being used to legitimate practices and policies that I don't believe in, is the time when I decide to leave and try and make a difference in a different way. But to your specific question, I think right now it's an open question for UCSB how the PAB will be involved in the complaint process. The PD, cites various legal constraints on what they can share in terms of officer information with respect to particular complaints. But I think there are all kinds of ways we could get redacted data that's about the conduct of the PD rather than a specific officer. And that would give us some better chance. I think we also should be the ones who are convening places for community members to report problems and concerns directly for exactly the reasons Michelle raises. This can be, and we ought to have a variety of venues, including ones that are entirely anonymous, but where the police board can take them up. But I think this is a place where we could really use guidance from system-wide that would require police departments to include police advisory boards in their adjudication of complaints and concerns. Because without that, I don't think it will happen.
Yeah, thanks. Jeffrey, thanks for mentioning the system-wide guidance. If any of the others of you have thoughts on that particular aspect, which is from all the work that you've done, all the study you've done, the things that you would like to see be system wide, but not just local, because some things make sense in this community led, community based, but on the other hand, are there some standard things that ought to be consistent across all the campuses from your point of view? Katie and Humberto, we haven't heard from you in a few minutes. If you've got something.
I agree with Michelle and Jeffrey that system-wide, the complaint process and or feedback process has to be accessible to all members of our community. It has to be streamlined. I find it very confusing. I'm also a member of our Public Safety Advisory Committee, and we've had a lot of presentations on the various complaint procedures, and they're hard to follow, frankly. It's complex, and it doesn't have to be that way system-wide. And we've also called for, like Jeffrey, we're an advisory body, but we believe we're being taken seriously, and our report is being taken seriously, but we also recommend that there has to be some community body that has actual oversight and actual authority, right, over the complaint and feedback process, like Michelle mentioned. And I also just want to highlight one other thing too, is that I think it seems like the complaint process is driven by the question whether or not the officer violated a policy. Mm-hmm. Whereas that's not the ultimate question for many of us. It is this conduct we want an officer doing on our campus? They might have not violated a technical policy, but it's still policing we find unacceptable. And so broader questions of, which I think a civilian or independent oversight board could address, right? That's part of the problem when you have no independence over who's adjudicating the complaint, is that they might be limiting their review to, was a policy broken? But again, the community might have broader concerns about the conduct that led to the complaint. It might not have violated a policy, but it still may be unacceptable, or policing we don't want to reward in our community. And so a broader view of what needs to be reviewed by an independent body or community-based, oversight board. There's a lot of different terms for it. I think that's important to also realize the scope of that work is bigger than just, was a policy violated?
Right. Humberto, do you have anything to add, or your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to restate a lot of what has been said. I agree a lot with my colleagues, and I want to leave some time for some of the short and long-term suggestions. But also, I just want to mention that we've talked a lot about accountability, right? And I want to go back a little bit and reiterate that all the accountability in the world will not rebuild trust with the student population. So I think it's important to think about that. But also, yeah, I highly agree with what has been stated, throughout history, officers have not been held accountable because of this internal process. And on their website, it states that reports need to be filed within 30 days, which can also be problematic, right? Having a limit on that. And also, I have an example from my research of a student who had an incident outside of the university where they were reporting a complaint, and just to give a little bit of description on the process, an officer was sent to her home to interview her, right? And during this process, the officer was very leading in her interview, and basically he ended up with a report that she wasn't comfortable with and that didn't state what she wanted to say in the report. And then unsurprisingly, they were not found guilty, right, for the complaint. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of that insight, and also this leads to people being afraid to make complaints. I mean, community members, students have been verbally threatened by officers, and they fear of retaliation is really something that folks are afraid of after complaints. And by retaliation, I mean targeting, right, for police reporting. A lot of people and a lot of participants mention being afraid because police know where they live, right, where they hang out on campus, etc. So yeah, that's kind of some of the things that I wanted to point out. And also, I think that we should hold like consider stronger consequences for officers that are involved in misconduct. And yeah, that's a little bit of my thoughts.
I've been trying to sneak a peek at some of the questions and answers coming through. It's kind of difficult while I'm talking with you, but I noticed this discussion about the advisory boards has gotten a lot of interest from the people. And one of the suggestions was, since Humberto, you mentioned like maybe moving to more of the solution, was talking about maybe that's one of the areas for system-wide guidance is on the makeup or authority of the boards. What do you guys think about that? Anyway, that was one of the questions. You're all muted.
Jeffrey, do you have a response on that since you are participating on a board?
Sure. I think the authority of the accountability boards or the advisory boards is really crucial, but I think there needs to be a lot of specificity on what that consists of. So does it, in what role do we play in listening to, responding to, and adjudicating concerns about policing practices? And as Katie said, I completely agree. Katie, Michelle, and Umberto all mentioned this, that there may be things that are legit, that are within police practice, but that are not at all acceptable to community members. And so I think we have to have a broad view of this. So, what role can these advisory boards have in hearing these complaints and offering not just feedback to police departments, but concrete recommendations that they have to listen to and take into account? And so some kind of guidance on our role in that process, I think, would be really crucial. I doubt that will extend to disciplinary measures with respect to individual officers, because those are governed by union contracts and a range of other things. But I certainly think that we can have a more concrete role in how police departments police their communities, and guidance on that would be really useful.
Interesting. The next question that had popped up was one about union contracts. Where do union contracts figure into getting to where you want to go and reimagining policing and safety? Anybody looked at that or have any thoughts on that? If there's nothing else on this theme specifically, or any other thoughts on solutions, long-term or short-term, Lisa, I know you've been tracking the questions more closely than I've been able to. And I think we're right about that time anyway, where we could be turning to that. And I know some of you wanted to get there. What's another question that the people participating have put forward that we would like to put to this panel?
Yes, well, we have a question about reinvestment, and it's, would reinvestment work with existing campus structures, mental health services, resource centers, student support services, Title IX offices, etc.? Or do you have a vision for how this reinvestment would be administered?
That's a big question.
So Michelle, seems like you would have some great ideas in the area of the reinvestment. Would you like to share?
I can take this one. So with the No UCPD Coalition, we decided that our strategy is going to be tackling these different powers, like you mentioned, the mental health services, the food accessibility, the housing issues. We're trying to tackle them each and kind of go about it in a great term that I have learned by one of my mentors, Isaac Bryan, is incremental abolition. So that means just abolition is, as much as we would love for abolition to happen overnight, we got to do it incrementally. And that means tackling these different forces and reinvesting in them little by little. So No UCPD, we have come up with a CAPS campaign, so a Counseling and Psychological Services campaign, where we aim to divest UCPD and remove them from the mental health process and reinvest in mental health services, that being with 5150s, mental health services, like when people are considered a danger to themselves or to others. We call that So for short-term goals, we want significant amount of funding to be redistributed from UCLA PD and all the campuses, all the PDs, into pilot programs, which each campus can take mental health professionals and respond to these crises according to policy and training that has been created with student input and community input. And there's a lot of organizations that have already been creating these models like CAT 911 or MH First Sacramento. And we're aware that UCLA has begun this process, but we believe that significant student input is needed in order to create the most equitable and the most safe protocol. And we also want to revisit these policies, as many res life and housing protocols require that UCPD be called in certain situations. So we would want to revisit these policies and rewrite them with these organizations that are doing the work, as well as everything from small scale. So transportation from campus to hospital, or who shows up when someone is having a mental health crisis. And it just means that safety of students does not always mean a carceral response. Sometimes it means just meeting their needs, or even preventative measures, so that there isn't even the need for these services. So, and then also we are asking that students be given an option to request a therapist of color, just the same way that people are asked if they are more comfortable with a male or a female therapist. Students of color have very different experiences, very different traumas that therapists of color would be more adequate for. So just to highlight that, those are the immediate demands of the No UCPD Coalition. While we can go on all day about what needs to be done short term, that those are our short demands.
Can I add to that? Because I think the idea of whether it will be a resource that's already available on campus or has to be added really varies by campus. Where, you know, our UC campuses are all really different in the communities that they're located in. So we have very different, you know, environments with social service resources that we can access. But just to give an example of a example that Michelle brought up earlier, like arrests for trespass, this is a nonviolent, low-level misdemeanor that we could choose to decriminalize, right? I mean, if we look at who's getting arrested for trespass, there might be a lot of overlap with mental health issues, mental illness, or homelessness. And rather than criminalize that and use an armed police officer to arrest for trespass, we may choose to provide a ride to a shelter, or provide a ride and food to you know, a place where they can access social services or counseling, food, home, you know. So we can choose situations that arise on our campus and then say, instead of treating it as a crime, we can choose to increase the social services that person has available to them. And that might be services that we already have on our campus, if it's a member of our campus community, or if it's someone from the outside community, we could link them with available social services outside our campus. But I just wanted to highlight this note, like the trespass example, as one that we could choose to treat very differently if we so chose.
So it's one thing to reassign resources. It's another to say, what are the situations where our current policies force us into or lead us into assigning someone in the first place? You know, the whole assignment process would need to be revisited.
And it links to our conversation about data, right? What are our calls for service, right? And so all of these conversations are linked, because we need to understand what the police are doing, and then we can make different choices about who's doing that. And then when we make a different choice about who's going to show up for that call of service, we need to make sure that the resources that we want to provide are well funded. And that's where the questions of divesting and defunding the police come from, right? Because we're going to put that money to social services instead of a policing response.
So those two things go hand in hand. Humberto, I get the feeling you have something you want to add?
Yeah, definitely. So we're going through the short-term goals right now.
Yes.
Cool.
Sure.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so this is where I hope that your pen and paper is still out. So I think that, you know, I'm gonna list a couple of things, and I hope that, you know, if I start to see some of these changes, then I will know that this panel, like I wasn't just here spending my time on my spring break here, right? And it was actually valuable. So yeah, so I think I agree with a lot of what has been said, especially with what Katie said. And you know, these scholars mention like the differences between the non-reformist reforms and the reformist reforms. And I think that and reformist reforms, right, empower the institution, like adding, you know, cameras and more cameras on campus or whatever. So I think that we can agree together, like with the department, on reforms that we both agree on. And again, these non-reformist reforms, right? So like, I've heard officers that agree with defunding themselves if it means funding social workers. So pointing out things like that, they're like, they themselves point out that they're not equipped to handle situations like that. So if we could agree on that, that could help move us forward. Additionally, some of the things that I would like to see short term that ultimately will help, like what we've been talking about. One, create a student paid position that focuses on reimagining public safety actively. And this would be a position for Black, Indigenous, people of color, right? Graduate and undergraduate students, and chosen by the student body. So that's one thing that I would like to see, at least one position, but I think, you know, more will be helpful. And then also a paid position that will help increase the transparency, like a point person or like an academic or an academic group that collects the data from the UCPD to make it accessible. And consider posting it on their website through a data tableau, and just posting the data on there. So I think that these are things that can help like create, like facilitate the problems that we encountered when trying to access the data. So yes, those are some of the like short-term goals that I would like to see.
Other thoughts on short or long-term solutions? To any of the three topics we've talked about so far, or any others? If not, I have another question.
I'll bring up one other short term that our group at UC Irvine, because it was mentioned earlier, I believe at one of the student panel, was that campuses, and this could be a UC-wide guidance thing as well, need to understand that we can remove the policing function from student protests and labor rights actions. That's a short-term thing that could be done to completely change how, or at least seriously analyze how each campus is handling police presence at work, you know, strikes, labor actions, and student social justice protests. I wanted to just throw that out there because I heard that mentioned on the student panel earlier.
Okay.
And I quickly want to just mention, like, to give an example of that. I remember being at a university abroad out in the Netherlands, right? And you know, when I was walking around UCLA, like I saw a lot of cops like on campus, right? Like the police vehicles riding around through campus. And then I noticed that I didn't see that out in the Netherlands. And I asked the chancellor like about that, right? And he told me that there was no police on campus. And I asked, like, what about protests, during protests, you know? They're like, oh no, we don't call police, like we actually take them pizza, right? And stuff like that. So just like one of the things and one of the long-term goals that I want to also highlight and recommend is exploring the successes in other countries, you know, other universities and across the US and other universities across the world, right? And like trying to develop the best safety practices that they use. So that's another like long-term recommendation that I want to make. And also some of the things that have been mentioned as well earlier today, I want to continue to bring them to the light, such as getting input from the students on how to best reallocate UCPD funding, and also some of the disarming and demilitarizing of the UCPD on campus as long-term.
Thanks, Humberto. I'm going to ask it for a little more because one of the questions that had just come up was regarding commitments. And I noticed you had advocated these 2 paid positions around reimagining policing and around data and transparency. So the question had to do with, something comes out of this and there are commitments made. Like, how is this going to be tracked? How is progress going to be tracked, as commitments are made to make change? Do you have any thoughts on that other than those 2 paid positions?
The thing that I'm thinking of is a 3rd paid position, to keep track of that. Like, I imagine that the person who are continuously continuously like advocating for the reimagination of public safety is going to be keeping track of that, right? So I think that sort of work will fall under that position.
So we talked earlier about accountability. So this is the future accountability for commitments that are made. Jeff, I saw your hand up.
I was just going to say one other short-term goal that would be easily trackable is removing guns from most of the officers patrolling campuses. That's just not a first-line need on most campuses for most issues, and so there doesn't need to be that doesn't need to be part of what police officers are rolling around with, and that's an easily trackable thing. We can all see whether our police are walking around armed. Yeah, so that's one straightforward, measurable thing we could.
So one of the ways to track commitments is by having commitments that are easily observed, as opposed to ones that are subject to interpretation. Katie, do you have something?
I was just going to add that and this relates to the notion there should be paid positions. There needs to be someone whose job it is to oversee this transformation process on each campus. We're advisory boards. The students are also responsible for their own education. We're faculty, we're doing our other we all have day jobs, and we're also doing all of this because it's important to us and we believe in this and we're passionate about this. But we can also, the university and the UC system can show commitment to these changes by making it someone's full-time job, or at least a good portion of their full-time job, to see these short-term changes, to coordinate across departments. This is a complicated problem and a complicated issue. So it's hard for all of us to do this, as you said, on their spring break, on our spare time. This needs someone's full attention. And I think that's another way to have project manager or a coordinator or someone who is making sure all the pieces are moving and we're accomplishing both short-term and longer-term solutions.
We are reaching rapidly the end of our time together. Thank you all for everything you've been able to offer us so far. We covered a lot of ground. Any last thoughts from anyone? Any quick takes?
I can close this off a bit. I just wanted to say I really challenge everyone to reimagine these policies. A very nice following that I like to always keep in my heart is the Zapatista saying of let's imagine a world with many worlds in it. And I think that's what we should always all keep in mind. I don't think we should limit ourselves by, oh, that's the law, that's the way things have always been. We have lived pre-colonially away from policing systems. A lot of indigenous communities back where I'm from, or even here in the US, have their own systems of accountability and public safety. So why not model after those systems? We have seen LAUSD significantly defunded their ties with LAPD. We've seen the Oakland School Department get rid of their police department just with a overnight, it was really like the ideal abolition structure. So I really want us to look at these incidents and really think about, okay, maybe this is actually possible. Maybe we can actually reimagine this. There's people actually doing the work. So it's not an untangible idea, or it's not something far-fetched. It's definitely just takes a bit of a push, and it just takes a bit of imagination and definitely funding, which is something that we seem to have a lot, but it's in the wrong places. So I really challenge everyone here to take these thoughts and become involved more than anything.
Well, thank you, Michelle. And right after lunch, the next piece, we have a whole one focused on the theme of reimagining, the role of police and that. So we're definitely going to be able to use this panel to roll into the next one and keep this conversation going. Lisa, you want to take us out to lunch?
Yes.
Literally, obviously.
I don't know if I can afford that. I would just a very special thank you to our panelists for sharing their perspectives and providing insight and ideas on short and long-term solutions. We hope everyone that has appreciated the opportunity to hear from these panelists and that their remarks have helped further or broaden the discussion today. So we are now ready to take a lunch break, and we will be returning at 1:10 p.m. for our second panel focused on re-examining and reassigning roles of police and other UC personnel. We will see you at 1:10 p.m. Thank you. Welcome back. We would now like to invite you into a second panel discussion to share insights and perspectives on re-examining and reassigning roles of police and other UC personnel. Members of our distinguished panel are Mr. Jack Clark Jr., partner at Best and Krieger LLP, and chair of the Task Force on Campus Safety at UC Riverside. Ms. Nicole Green is also joining us as a panelist. She is the Executive Director of Counseling and Psychological Services at UCLA. Kirby Lynch is also joining us, a graduate student and co-chair of the Independent Advisory Board at UC Berkeley. Mr. Gene McAdoo, who is an undergraduate student at UCLA. Mr. Martin Reed, Assistant Vice Chancellor for Student Life and Residence Education at UC Merced, and Professor Savannah Shange, Assistant Professor of Anthropology and Principal Faculty in Critical Race and Ethnic Studies at UC Santa Cruz. The question for our panelists is, what is your perspective on re-examining and reassigning roles of police and other UC personnel based upon your insights, experiences, and what you have learned? Can you start us off, Jack?
I'll certainly try, and thank you for inviting me to participate on a panel like this. I'll say at the outset, since I was the chair of a task force, I will try to, as much as I can, give voice to the various perspectives. So I'm going to make 4 suggestions, and actually there are 4 recommendations that the Chancellor at UCR has already publicly stated he's embracing. But as the discussion goes on, I want to be clear that in our effort to address these issues, there was much disagreement. There were some places of intersection, and we recognize this is a place where people of goodwill need to use their best efforts. 4 things, it seems to me. One is giving recognition and credence to the concern about the concept of policing in our society. That the concept of policing rather should be more a movement to community and in this case, campus safety overall. That would require considering and implementing a series of elements within the campus community that could address mental health concerns, address people who are simply in crisis, address non-force, situations where force is not being used. And so I believe the UCR campus is considering and making efforts to actually create a department that reflects those concepts. A couple of other things, and I was listening to a portion of the panel before, and I'll be quick because it's a large panel and we only have an hour. Accountability, assigning high-level administration to make sure change occurs. In reading just briefly from some of the literature, it was even noted that in 1967, there were recommendations made at the United States president level in terms of changing police, and yet those changes really didn't come into fruition. And so at UCR, for example, there is going to be a provost level administrator who's going to be chairing the newly formed Chancellor's Campus Safety Committee. Also, there's going to be a vice chancellor level person who's going to serve as chair of the incoming community accountability board, which will replace the current campus community advisory board. Those are just some opening ideas. I'll certainly, especially since I'm a lawyer, I could take this entire time, but I'm not going to do that.
All right. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, Jack. And now we will go to Jean. Jean McAdoo.
Yeah, good afternoon. I guess I really want to highlight, something I think that's been mentioned like repeatedly throughout today's, the history of policing and, policing being an institution that's inherently anti-Black. And I think I want to talk about, what that means when we're talking about re-examining the role of police. And so I really like Kihana Ross from Northwestern. She wrote an article about, abolishing police in schools, and she talks about the impossibility of a protective relationship between police and Black students. And so, I think we've kind of talked about like the history of policing shows that, this impossibility of a protective relationship between police and Black people, in the way that police have always been deployed to police Black people first as property. And then, after emancipation, we see that, policing has continuously been used to as a method of social control against Black people. And so even to more recently, campus policing really grew as a response to desegregation of college campuses, right? And so we'll see more students of color advocating for ethnic studies. And so, and then even to bring it to Westwood, right, where Michelle kind of talked about Black people being 2% of the population of Westwood, but 29% of the arrests, right? And the top arrest offense, I suppose, was warrants, right? So I think, that makes me think about slave catching, right? And so just to kind of show where it's not just rhetorical flair when we're talking about policing being an institution that's right rooted in anti-Blackness and, dating back to slavery. And so I guess all of that to say, to kind of rebuild on the, to build on the discussion about reconciliation, I think if you're talking about this impossibility of a protective relationship between police and Black people, there really can't be any reconciliation, and not just Black students, but for other marginalized groups as well, because we all experience policing, right? And so I think to keep bringing it back to the data, I think we need to, when we're thinking about solutions, we should, our solutions should be based on the data, right? And if we're talking about a lot of the arrests being trespassing, and I think Dr. Quinto talked about the possibility of overlap between homeless populations in Westwood and, mental health situations and all these things. So, as far as, we need to decriminalize these things. I think also think about, I think it would be interesting to see where these situations are occurring. Because I think, in Westwood, there's a really large amount of homeless people, right, living on the streets of Westwood, right? And it's, I think the UC can do more to address these types of things. And so to kind of finish some more solutions, well, one thing about solutions I want to say is that there needs to be a timetable, because I think we've seen administrators kind of stall out on a lot of solutions a lot of times. And so I think there needs to be a timetable for everything. But I would say redirecting funds to psychological services, I think that's been mentioned a lot. Expanding psychological services to address long wait times, hiring more therapists of color, expanding basic needs programs, that's been mentioned. establishing a scholarship endowment for Black students and other marginalized students throughout the UC. I think Berkeley has something like that, and I think that's something that can definitely be implemented. And all of these things, you know, can be taken from the UCPD police budget, and you know, finding other funding sources. And then also talking about, I think someone mentioned, right, recruitment. If we want to diversify the UC, directing more funds towards programs that recruit Black students and recruit other represented students. So, you know, those are just some initial solutions. I won't take up any more time.
Thank you, Jean. That is quite an extensive list of ideas, long and short and long term. Let's go to Nicole. Nicole, could you please share your thoughts and perspective?
Hi, good afternoon, panelists and community. I'm a psychologist and I oversee counseling and psychological services for UCLA. And I'm just going to share a little bit about my perspective. I know we've talked a lot about mental health and re-examining the way in which mental health is criminalized. And so my thoughts are really just to kind of shape what the challenges are from my perspective and think about some solutions. So long-standing, there's been a history of mental illness being stigmatized and criminalized. Mental health, we know, is, you know, we're at a point where it's a worldwide crisis and it's been long starved. And so what has happened over time, we know that this is true for communities of color even more so, is that it's often treated too late and it's often treated with from the perspective of being criminalized at that point. And trauma ends up being treated within the criminal justice system, especially for communities of color. And that's true for Black folks, and is rather than a health concern. And we see that a lot of folks are getting a lot of their treatment after they're incarcerated. And if you look at juvenile arrests, drug-related crimes, women who are incarcerated, many of these stem from underlying issues of trauma. So what's happened is that police have been, you know, used in a lot of ways because of the way that we think about mental health to sort of mitigate and respond to mental health crises, when that just doesn't make sense as we think about mental health as a healthcare concern. And so there are a number of challenges when UCPD responds to mental health crises, which doesn't happen on all the campuses, but it certainly happens at UCLA. And so first of all, one of the challenges is that at that point, when UCPD is often called, the assessment is pretty rudimentary in a lot of ways. It's not sophisticated. It's really restricted to a few very basic questions. And officers really can't go beyond anything more sophisticated the way that a mental health clinician would to better assess things like bipolar disorder, psychosis, early intervention, and ways to follow up in an appropriate way. Beyond the assessment issue, there's no real intervention offered in the moment beyond just sort of de-escalating a crisis and maybe a referral. So many students are often left, and staff and faculty too, honestly, having only had police contact and really thinking and re-stigmatizing that I've done something wrong and associating a mental health episode with really something to be punished, which further stigmatizes us. There's little to or no follow-up care in many instances. The police came, someone was concerned, they left, and that's that. No check, like 3 days later, are they doing any better? Are they doing any worse? What other resources are needed? And obviously this also contributes to a lot of the conversation we've been having about just the role of anti-racism in this. We've talked, you know, the panel has well-versed on a lot of the ways in which Black and Brown communities are criminalized in various ways. And this contributes to the ongoing criminalization and stigmatization, and that folks are dangerous, and that potentially folks of color are dangerous. And we really want to walk away from students having the experience of, I reported for the first time in my life that I'm suicidal, and being handcuffed and put in police cars, which is obviously very further traumatizing. I also just want to make sure that we acknowledge that, you know, this is a health equity issue, that if we're thinking about anti-racism in this more global way, that we can't get away from the differential impact on our mental health when folks are put in police cars, when we're not really addressing mental health with mental health clinicians in the lead. And this has been an ongoing issue, and it's a deterrent to real treatment. There may be implicit bias involved in who gets the police called on them and who doesn't. I mean, we're clear about that. The data is pretty clear. And bigger than that, the health and well-being of the community is just really then further deteriorating because treatment doesn't happen. People can't fully recover. People are often then deterred from further treatment. And really and truly, from a health equity issue, this really needs to be addressed and remedied. So, we know that across the country, there are psychological assessment and response teams where mental health people are in the lead. Really, the UC, this should be a standard of care. I think some of the problem on most of the campuses is that you either have to be very willing to go to treatment, go to counseling and psychological services or one of the health care centers across the system. And there really isn't a place to go when someone is in crisis and they're not already in a health facility. And we don't have a model of really going to where folks are. And this is where the challenge is. And I know that there have been a lot of issues raised around this being a safety issue, but we know that there are ways to de-escalate crisis that don't have to involve the police. In addition, I'll just kind of, that's really a short-term thing that I think we can all do, and I think it's low-hanging fruit. From a longer term, I just think the UC, we need to have a question about what do we really want for the community, with a focus on health and well-being, and that embedded in that, a focus on racial justice. I personally don't believe that you can really have a healthy community if you're not addressing issues of oppression and racial equity. So longer term, prevention, education, outreach, as has been mentioned, and really acknowledging the relationship between oppression and mental health and how that shows up and makes some communities even more vulnerable to mental health issues, which makes us more vulnerable to policing, and we really need to reverse these cycles. So in my thoughts, this is really low-hanging fruit and stuff that we can address pretty quickly. I think the last thing I'll just say is I think that there needs to be some mental health intervention for all the racial incidences that happen in the community, as opposed to students coming in individually saying this thing happened to me. And the last thing is the accountability and transparency that's already been mentioned so that we understand what's working and what's not. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Nicole. Can we have Martin please share your thoughts and perspective on re-examining and reassigning roles of police and other UC personnel? Martin, do we have Martin available?
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. I'm available. So I would like to elaborate a little bit more on what Nicole was commenting on. First of all, I'm honored to share this space with you to discuss this critical topic. And for me, throughout my career, I've interacted with Black students living in the residence halls to make sure that they feel comfortable living on campus, to let them know they matter, they belong, and to support their academic success as they adapt to the campus environment and endeavor to achieve their college degree. And I think this is significant because Black scholars often encounter incidents of implicit bias, silencing, and microaggressions while on campus. And of course, as an African-American male, I can relate to their feelings of fear and distrust of the police, as well as their feelings of exhaustion in constantly dealing with individual and institutional racism. And so for me, like some of the solutions I think are, we need to listen to our students and take action to address their concerns. We need to create spaces for Black students to find kinship and community to support each other after experiencing negative incidents of implicit bias and microaggressions on campus. And above all, we need to create campus environments to address the institutional structures and culture and policing that have fueled and promoted anti-Blackness for centuries. Likewise, we need to make sure our public safety team and police officers have the resources necessary to serve and protect the campus. And we need to invest in hiring police officers that will meet UC expectations and standards for serving the community. I think we do a pretty good job at UC Merced already doing this. For example, my team has often served on the recruitment and the hiring process for our police officers. One thing I think we could do better is maybe include some students in the process so that they can, again, participate in who is selected to work at UC Merced as a police officer. And I also think that we need to probably do a better job of just being open and transparent with the data, as was mentioned in earlier panels. That would be another short-term solution we could implement. And one long-term solution is just developing, I think, a comprehensive training program related to implicit bias training for faculty, staff, students, and also our police force. And I look forward to hearing other voices.
Before we move on to our next panelist, I just want to remind everyone that if you have any questions with regard to some of the discussion or need clarifying kind of questions for some of the remarks made during this panel discussion, please feel free to submit those through the Q&A function, and we will be able to address some of those with the time remaining at the end of this panel discussion. So I'd like to go on. Thank you, Martin. And now I'd like to go to Kirby.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Can you all hear me? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
yes. My name is Kirby Lynch. I'm a current PhD candidate at UC Berkeley in the Department of Geography. I'm also the founding board member and the current student chair of the Independent Advisory Board on Police Accountability and Campus Safety. I'm so excited to share remarks with you all, as I have been a student at UC Berkeley since 2013. I entered Berkeley as a college freshman from North Vallejo, California. If anybody knows anything about North Vallejo, not only is that where Mac Dre and SOB and RBE are from, but it's also where one of the most deadliest police departments in the country resides as well. So I come from a context of, my mother knowing intimately that I need to stay in the house, get good grades in school, and go to a place like UC Berkeley and, make an intervention. And actually my first encounter with the police happened after my first year, where me and my friends were taking a study break around 10 p.m. and we walked across the street, and the Berkeley Police Department aggressively drove on a curb, almost ran us over. You can also see it in the viral video. Drove up on the curb and told us that we were jaywalking. And I was 19 years old at the time, but my other two friends who were a little older, they knew intimately what was going on, which was hostile racial profiling. But, jaywalking is a huge crime in Berkeley, even though everybody jaywalks in Berkeley. But it was 10 p.m. at night, and Black students jaywalking at 10 p.m. at night is the issue. Don't want to go into the details of it, but it was definitely an eye-opening moment for me, because, May 4th, 2014, I thought I was going to die. And this was before Black Lives Matter. And this was before August 9th, 2014, when Michael Brown Jr.'s body was in the middle of his apartment complex for 3.5 hours. What happened to me and my friends was before that national moment. And so when I heard about Michael Brown dying the way he did on the news, they had first said it was jaywalking. If you all remember, they had accused him of jaywalking. So I had like a spiritual moment, because on May 4th, 2014, I literally thought I was going to be killed by the police. There's about 6 cop cars surrounding us in Berkeley, literally a block away from campus on Dana Street. But I shared the story because it was at that moment, for some reason, people were confused on who should take responsibility. These politics of jurisdiction and authority. We were a block away from campus, harassed by Berkeley Police Department, but the UC was like, that wasn't us. And so that was the issue. And that's been the challenge since 2014, is kind of looking the other way and saying, well, that wasn't us. And so here we are in 2021, and I'm a little hyped up because a year into the board, there are significant issues. That happened when I was 19, I'm now 26. And so I'm really speaking to Black student activists because in many ways, we can sometimes be bamboozled by the diversity, equity, and inclusion imperatives of the university. But the fact remains that there is biased policing towards Black students at the University of California at Berkeley. This has been proven with the data by someone known as Rashid Shabazz, who wrote an amazing article called Policing in the Shadows. And as a student advocate actively since 2014, I've been in everybody's ear in administration about the biased policing against Black students, right? We know that the Equal Education Opportunity Act of 1974 tells us that students should have access to education free of harassment and discrimination. And so it's funny to me that, you know, in 2021, I'm having the same conversations I was having when I was 19. And it's funny that since 2014 to 2021, a whole lot has happened at Berkeley. As you know, there's been intense militarization. So when Darren Wilson and his verdict came out, we saw that UC Berkeley became the host of the military gear. You know, I was walking on campus and there was riot gear and riot, like military, you know, back in 2014, which led to the lawsuit where Berkeley Police Department is known to actually be brutalizing students, right, with excessive force. Again, the University of California did not say anything, right, but there was whole lawsuits. Then we had Free Speech Week. I mean, there's been many things that happened. I don't even want to go into like the individual cases I've had to like advocate for Black students, but the most interesting moment where I really saw the role of UCPD was during Free Speech Week, where we had literal mutual aid from all of the surrounding California counties, those officers coming to the university and having a very strong military presence. And so as someone who's been a student advocate, been in student government, you know, student advocates were not in part of those conversations. Student advocates are not a part of the protest response team. And that's the issue. There is no shared governance and no shared power in UCPD. It's seen as a security concern. But what we can do and what we can have real conversations about, particularly in the independent advisory board, is investigatory and disciplinary power. Justice is free, to be honest. You know, we spend a lot of time figuring out, oh, how can we divest from the police to invest in some other campus department? You know, all of the financiers of the university, the vice chancellors of finance, I really trust that you all can figure out how to balance that budget. But what is free is the disciplinary power that can be shared between community members and UCPD. There is a contract, and in that contract between the FUPOA and the University of California, who is the employer of the police, to actually assert that it is the university administration who will have that disciplinary power. It cannot just be the chief of police of that particular campus department calling the shots. And as Black students, because of the level of our discrimination, I mean, that's just what it is, at the University of California, Berkeley, these behind the room, backroom deals, 5 Black students who you feel are the legit Black students and you're making concessions with them, that has to stop. It really does. And so the role of the police, the role of UCPD is that we have to invest in internal affairs. We have to invest in people in the department who have the actual skill set to deliver accountability. We have a community engagement unit at UC Berkeley. Do you think that community engagement unit actually does community engagement? That community engagement unit, when we needed community engagement, when we have right now hostility between the unhoused and the police, do you think that community engagement showed up and tried to facilitate those tensions? No. If anything, community engagement unit was closed down this year and was rolled back into patrol. And so there are specific things happening in UCPD that the administration is very much so well aware of, that student advocates pretty much for the past 10 years have been saying specifically. Again, I was one of the authors of the IAB report, a 95-page single-space report, a high-quality report done by students, not a consultant, high-quality report that outlined what the UC specifically needs to do. And you all took that report and you knew that you did not pay a consultant to come up with a program for that. So it's like, you know that there are high quality student recommendations coming to you all. And what is free, what does not cost money, is shared power, shared governance. I mean, I don't even know how to say it. If I was like, if this is just my one time to say something to the UC and to the people in power, is that we need disciplinary power. You can literally put that in the contract, because there was an officer, and I probably won't say their name, but there was an officer who just retired from UCPD at Berkeley. It was in 2014 when this officer literally took a young Black woman off her bike single-handedly and forced her to the ground, a young Black woman. It was Black students at the University of California at Berkeley who had said this officer is an issue. It took a viral video of this officer taking money from a man who had worked all day cooking hot dogs. It took another viral video of this same officer body slamming another unhoused person in People's Park to the ground for that officer to finally retire 10 years later. And I only say I've been at the UC for 8 years because it takes a lot to be at less than 2% Black at UC Berkeley for 8 years. And so I'm speaking truth to power that freedom ain't free, but some of these reforms first could start off with shared power, and particularly disciplinary power, to really speak truth to power of what we need in this community. And particularly with my Black students, I want to uplift the names of Elgin Stafford, Ted Agu, Malik Nixon, Bryson Young, Salam Akur. These are 5 Black students who were gone by the end of my first year, dead, DEAD, ain't coming back because of the hostile campus climate. And because of UCPD having absolute power. We know that absolute power corrupts absolutely. It is one of the only campus departments that is not checked. And that is an issue. And I think, and I hope the University of California is committed, particularly President Drake. I hope you are committed as our first Black president to really remind UCPD that the University of California is your employer, and hopefully FUPOA can come to the bargaining table and share disciplinary power with its employer and with the community that it serves.
Thank you very much, Kirby, for your really meaningful and powerful comments and remarks, which I think are going to be leading to some of your ideas and solutions. We next have Savannah. Please share your perspective on re-examining and reassigning roles of police and other UC personnel. Savannah?
Thank you, Lisa. And so I want to take a step back here. Thank you everyone for your contributions on this panel. But I think I want to take a step back and really address safety, which is why we're here and what this panel is about, right? Nicole, you talked about this. And I think it's important to note that safety isn't cerebral. It's not a data point. You can't put it on a graph. And so I want to take my, I'm the faculty member, I want to take pedagogical imperative and do a little 1-minute exercise together. And so I'd like to ask you just to back off the screen. We're zoomed out. Take your eyes, literally look at something somewhere else in your room, out a window. Move your eyes off the screen, not to another smaller screen. I see you. And just get in your body a little bit. Release your hands. Relax the muscles around your eyes. Ungrip your jaw. Release your tongue. Take a deep breath in and hold it just for a moment at the top. Feel your fullest self. As you exhale, ask your body, when was the last time this body felt safe? Allow that body part that answered to remind you where you were. What was the scent in the air, the sensation on your skin? Maybe your safest self is 5 years old again, nestled against a parent, too long gone now. Maybe a safe place is a meal and delicious chaos of the language and rhythms that raised you. Maybe you're in the silence and solitude of your own bed, behind a locked door, with the company of a pet and your favorite book. Wherever you find yourself, I invite you to take a few breaths in that space. Retrieve some part of this experience, a color, a texture, a sensation, for you to have in this moment as refuge as we return to this conversation. That sensation that we brought back, that possibility of unconditional safety and wholeness for everyone, that is the impetus of abolition. And I appreciate you taking a moment to do that exercise. And of course, if you chose not to join us with that, that's also information too for you, right? About what it means for you to be able to access safety. And many of us know that there's nothing safe about the UC. So if we were on the kind of an open Zoom, a chatty Zoom, I would ask you how your body felt in that space, what you know to be true in this moment, to be true about safety or impossible about it. But I wanted us to do that because it's a reminder that safety is something that grows. It's something that's cultivated and lived in, like abolition. As Naomi said this morning, it is a presence and not an absence, right? Scholar, community worker, and Santa Cruz's 2021 MLK Convocation speaker, Miriam Kaba, asked us, what if abolition is something that sprouts out of the wet places in our eyes, the broken places in our skin, the waiting places in our palms, the tremble holding in my mouth when I turn to you? What if abolition is something that grows? And so touching that place in our bodies answers that question. I asked, what would it mean for our campuses to feel like that, right? I might also ask you in that moment, in that place where you were, raise your hand, literal or metaphysical, if there was a squad car there. Did you see a Glock or an AR-15? Maybe a baton. Was your beloved next to you wearing the night goggles that are part of the arsenal at UC Davis? No M16 assault rifles? So that's the kind of safety that cops bring, which is no safety at all. And I think the role of police, you asked about it, the role of police is to kill, arrest, intimidate, and patrol the borders of the university, to weaponize the borders between who belongs and who doesn't. That's it. I didn't need a reminder, but there it was the first week that I started work at UC Santa Cruz when I got pulled over on campus, my very first time, the third time I drove up that hill, right? The officer wanted to talk to me about my new car and where I was going. I told him the building, and he remarked, oh, you must be a new staff member. So I told him I was faculty. He kind of half believed me, but he apologized for the mistake and let me pass. But there was no mistake. He was doing his job to surveil and intimidate bodies that don't belong. And I don't tell this guy and trigger some kind of indignation, right? I bring it up because the brunt of the violence of the UCPD force, as Jean just mentioned, is borne by people who don't have a UC ID to flash, right? Who can't say in a huff, well, I am supposed to be here, right? Even though so few of us are supposed to be here. Black community members whose taxes also constitute our institutional budget, right? Who also pay my rent, who also have been able to bring Lisa and Lewis with here today, whose neighborhoods have been decimated by campus land grabs and university-driven gentrification, are imperiled by the actions of UC police daily. Ask the 11-year-old kid who was handcuffed in the playground on the campus housing that he lives in because he's the child of a student in Albany, California. The police are not a source of safety. They are only a source of harm. And I could spend this kind of last minute or so, I'm wrapping up, kind of offering statistics and enumerating that harm, but that work has been done so well by Naomi and Umberto and Michelle, right? Jean, Kirby. If you look at some of the really rich reports coming out of campuses, the work that Nikki Jones did on the IAB at Berkeley, right? We have that work. And it's been done also, like UC Davis, UC faculty, Angela Davis and Robin Kelly reminded us in their recent op-ed, the campus police forces we have are not in need of another task force or another committee, right? They are the outcome of task forces. And so the response to the question, which is what is the role of police on UC campuses? The role of the police is none. Abolishing the UCPD has been the clear majority opinion all day long in our meetings today. And when I say abolish the UC police department, I mean permanently eliminating each of the 439 sworn officer positions, taking the thousands of deadly weapons to the foundry and melting them down, decommissioning police vehicles and using them to support access needs for disabled and commuting students, taking the office space and offering it at no cost to local organizations that do and have been doing the hard, unglamorous work of growing safety, not just in the shallow gravel of campus, but in the deep roots of community, right? And those same roots could be a resource to campuses. And so Michelle in the last panel talked about kind of this ideal case of the OUSD abolition of the Oakland School Police Department. I am on that implementation team. It is far from a perfect process, but those steps I just mentioned, eliminating all positions within 6 months of the decision being made, melting down all of the guns. I'm talking about the rifles, the revolvers, the Glocks that were owned by the Oakland School Police Department, right? Taking the funds and dedicating them not just to
safety in general, or safety as controlled by staff, students, and faculty, but safety in partnership with existing community-based Black, Latinx, and queer-led organizations, right? Those things are already happening in the OUSD, and we have models that we can follow. And I think it's important for us to remember, in order for the true safety that we touched, right, we just brought back from our little visualizations, if we want that to grow, the police have to go.
That concludes kind of the opening of remarks and perspectives of our panelists. And so what we would like to get into, and some of you have already mentioned some great and extensive list of short-term as well as long-term ideas on possible solutions. So if we want to, we still have plenty of time to do that. Who would like to start with some of the short term, or what do you think are some of the changes that could be made in the short term, if you're thinking about in the next year or so, that maybe the changes that have to be made, that need to be made right away? And, or if you would like to get into the long-term goals here, or solutions, excuse me, what do those solutions look like? If you're looking at campus safety and what our campuses look like, 5 years from now, what does that look like for you? Who would like to start?
Lisa, can I jump in here for a second? Because I mean, what we've just heard for the last half hour more has been really powerful. I think we had these questions and we told the panelists ahead of time we would be talking about long-term and short-term solutions. But I really felt like that might even be an inadequate question at this point based upon what we've heard. So I would like to free all of you up to talk about whatever you want to talk about, whether it's a long-term or short-term solution or something else that you have on your mind. It's supposed to be a dialogue, and I have to imagine that some of the things that some of your other panelists said have prompted something in you that you'd like to say as well. So I'd just like to open it up.
Yeah, I had an immediate thing, if people let me use this opportunity.
Yeah.
Currently, there's the use of deadly force, AB 392, that was passed after the assassination of Stephon Clark by Dr. Shelley Weber. But the UC actually needs to adapt our use of force policy to really, really envision the power of AB 392. So we have AB 392, and the use of force policy has been updated by the UC, but really just for legislative compliance. AB 392 actually gives the ability to expand the definition of deadly force. Coercion is deadly force. Juvenile interaction, depending on the body mismatch. If you have a very senior officer who has a bodily intimidation against a juvenile, which is anybody under the age of 24, like, then we need to start talking about use of force there. And so at the university, this police department isn't a regular police department. It's a campus police department. And because the officer roster in the UC is so secretive, we really never really know who belongs in the UC. Particularly at UC Berkeley, we found that most of the officer roster, they don't even have, social media profiles. So when you have a police department that doesn't have social media profiles, that is a red alert for white nationalism or for other types of covert organizing activities socially in a department. Particularly at University of California at Berkeley, in our police department, we have, I don't even want to talk about it. I don't even want to talk about all I know about y'all, but just know that AB 392 needs to be expanded, it needs to be strengthened, and it needs to be agreed upon by the FUPOA. If we're doing campus police reform and union rank and file officers are not a part of the conversation, we're spinning our wheels, because we're having conversations with officers who have no power. At University of California at Berkeley, on our IAB, we have officers on our board who have no power in their rank and file, who have no power to take our recommendations from the board and tell their peers within the department to implement these community recommendations. So again, the immediate solution is, how do we bring teeth to the IAB? Yes, we want abolition, but even at Berkeley, the city charter of Berkeley gives absolute power to police in general. So we have to work with the city council at Berkeley to even get them to even rethink the absolute power of the Berkeley Police Department. Again, we know absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's how the American Revolution got started. So immediately there's some policy things that need to be done in UCPD related to use of force that I would really love for the administration to really get behind, and really to not be content with, oh yeah, it's compliant with AB 392. No, it's not. You have the ability to really do something monumental here. And so that's just my most immediate thing. Also, disciplinary action. Again, this is free, this is legal. And also you can do investigatory power that aligns with the police officer Bill of Rights and their procedural rights. So I think when students are really giving y'all ideas, you know, these are high level ideas that we have researched thoroughly and that you as professionals need to take on this work. And as Black student activists, please do not keep doing this work for people who have salaries to do this work. At the University of California at Berkeley, students have done phenomenal work while six-figure earners have not done anything. So there are people within the actual police department who are paid themselves to be lieutenants of this work who do not show up. And not saying that, you know, police should be the ones handling it, but it's inappropriate that I have to talk to Michael Janico at the OIR group to figure out best practices in policing, because I'm the only one really dedicated to the issue.
Kirby, I don't know whether you were able to listen to the first panel, but Humberto made several suggestions of paid positions that he thought should be provided and even have them occupied by students as those paid positions to do some of the things that you're talking about. So that came up earlier. Also, we've had a couple of questions, I think related to what you're talking here, Kirby, about the Gold Book. So if anybody has any comments about the Gold Book, you know, things like use of force and other things, that would be useful to know. Savannah, I see your hand up.
I just want to respond. I mean, in part, this idea of short and long-term solutions, because I think that is really important. I know in the last panel we talked, I think maybe it was Michelle thinking about kind of what is the incremental, like how do we build towards this vision? And many people have talked about a future without policing. I'm thinking of the Student Association president. And so how do we get to that? And so I think I'm oriented towards it, you know, in UCSF, drawing UCSF in a Hippocratic way, right? So in terms of medical, approaching like a medical crisis, it's first do no harm, right? And then you try to start healing. So the short term is first do no harm. That means the first step is canceling contracts, getting guns out of hands. We can get guns out of hands Monday, right? Guns could go in arsenals locked up where they are on campus Monday, right? Officers off of campus September 1. Those contracts might need to, there may be some severance pay, you know, there's going to be labor stuff to get worked out on the back end. No one's going to be, you know, unhoused the next day out of, you know, from that situation. However, if the first part is stanching that wound, closing those contracts, getting cops out of campus, the long-term work is building towards safety. And so I want to speak a little bit about how that's looking in the OUSD context, because I am a member of the Black Organizing Project and part of the implementation task force that's making that leap from, you know, the police department's been closed, right? And so just to walk you through that, you know, I feel like this call from the Cops Off Campus Coalition is a collective goal of removing all police from all 10 campuses by fall 2021, right? Raise your hand if that seems like shockingly unfeasible. If you're like, that is like, that's not feasible, but it is, right? Practical abolition is happening every day in these different places. And so with the George Floyd resolution to eliminate school police, it was developed in partnership between the district and the Black Organizing Project. As Kirby is saying, thinking about ways to be accountable to formations that aren't just within the university structure, right? So it's passed, the resolution passed by the board in June, right? All police officers' positions were eliminated by January, that's 6 months. The chief of police stayed on an additional month to take care of delivering the weapons to the foundry, and then also decommissioning the body cameras and surveillance materials. But the dismantling part is gone, right? Just because the police are gone, you're not going to be more safe on campus the next day, right? And so in terms of, in Oakland, we're creating child and community-centered response plans for mental health crises, partnering with local, the local children's hospital and with community-based mental health. We're also doing trainings for de-escalation, for interrupting sexual violence and patterns of sexual violence. And this we on the implementation team is not the 132 participants that is the we in the symposium, right? What makes practical abolition work in the OUSD is that it's community accountable and grounded in the needs and priorities and leadership of Black and allied Oakland residents outside the district. I know we have folks on the YouTube, there's a lot of great work and exchange of resources happening there. We need to bring those folks together. UCOP is right in Oakland, but it has no accountability to the town, right? As a system, we're not learning from what is working in the communities that sustain our campuses. BOP is based in Oakland, but there's vibrant and effective organizations in every city with a UC campus. We should be taking cues from Mental Health First in Sacramento. Folks at Dignity Power and Power Now and Chuco's Justice Center in LA are modeling best practices they've been taking up in SoCal. Ruthie Gilmore's been brought up a couple times, but when she says abolition is about presence and not absence, and about building life affirming institutions, for the 10 UC campuses to become places that affirm Black life, we got to break that bubble between the campus and off campus and actually welcome more folks from community on campus. So there's not so much folks who aren't supposed to be there. There's questions about trespassing. And yes, there's in terms of how to be safe in your body and in your space, but often trespass has more to do about the hoarding of resources, right, than the maintaining of dignity and safety. Mariam Kaba has argued that abolition will take 1 million experiments. And that's also the title of this incredible zine project. I'm gonna drop the link in the chat here and also drop it on YouTube in a second. 1 million experiments in the direction of true safety. In the UC, we are 12,000 scientists strong. That's not counting the 6,000 at the postdocs, the 27,000 grad students, right? It is on us as the scientists to get in the lab and get to work. First step is dissolving all 10 UC police departments and eliminating their positions as of September 1st, 2021.
Yeah, Jack, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to share, and this I'm just again speaking on from the perspective of one viewpoint that was expressed in community forums we had and was embraced by the task force. And if I'm Savannah, if I'm misinterpreting what you're saying, please correct me. But what I'm hearing is something we found, and that is there should be a sense that the UC PD should be held to a higher standard than just a municipal or county police entity. And I do think with the resources that are available through the UC, the intellectual capital that is almost unparalleled in the world, the access to research, the access to the best practices, it is a good and reasonable goal to hold UCPD to a higher standard. It is simply not a municipal or a county police entity that is doing the best it can with what it got. It has access to much more, and I think it should be held to a higher standard. And the task force found that.
I think the thrust of what we have heard so far today is not, can I just do this little connection, is not just imagining police, but reimagining safety. I mean, I think that's what's elevated this above even a discussion about what standard police would be held to. Savannah, you had, and I want to make sure other people get a chance to weigh in the 15 minutes we have left. So go ahead, Savannah.
Clarify, I wasn't asking to change the standard police are held to. I think our energies are better suited to dissolving the police. We won't be holding them to any standards because they won't be on campus. They'll get off, once they get off the campuses, our next goal will be getting them out of our cities, out of the sheriff's departments, right? And so we start where we are, and this is where I am and where I'm responsible for fighting.
I hear you.
That's what I heard. Gene, I saw your hand, and then Martin.
Yeah, to kind of build off of Dr. Shange's point, I really like what she said about doing no harm first and redirecting. So, I mean, I think to me that means immediately, like she said, like eliminating police positions, disarming police. I think that's something that's been advocated for a long time by, many activist groups. I don't think that's something that's new. And I think generally like to imply that, we're trying to re-examine, the role of police or, re-examine the way we discipline them or the power or whatever. I think all of that really implies that we, that we need to, if we have less anti-Blackness, if we have less, all these different, logics that, things will be better. But I think we want to eliminate that completely, right? And the only way to do that has, it's been shown that we need to eliminate or minimize the contact that police have with the public. Right. And so I think, I think we've all pointed out that, that policing is an institution that's rooted in anti-Blackness and, rooted in trying to suppress worker movements. As we saw with, graduate students advocating for better living conditions, better working conditions. And so I just really think that, you know, it shouldn't be a question anymore of what we're going to do about it. It should be how we're going to move towards that. And so I think, like I mentioned before, I think there needs to be a timetable for this. There needs to be some accountability for administrators and for people involved to make sure that this happens. You know, I think immediately, like, what comes to mind is the situation at UCLA with the Black Resource Center. You know, students have been advocating for a Black Resource Center for decades, right? And, you know, administration moving at, you know, such a snail-like pace really to address Black student needs. So we really have to, you know, make sure that, you know, people involved in this process are held accountable to students. And so ultimately, as far as addressing student needs and things that are the short-term goals, I think, you know, we need to address the fact that students are generally unwell. I think Dr. Green kind of highlighted that. I think we've all kind of highlighted that, right? Just from, you know, not even just racial battle fatigue, which, you know, we could spend hours talking about that. But, you know, just, you know, from the trauma that we carry from, you know, our before we step on campus, the things that we experience on campus, just life, right? So what would it look like if the UC could address students' psychological needs, right? What would we can lessen the amount of 5150s that we need, and, you know, the amount of times that we call police or, you know, mental health services to address people in crisis if we provide more preventative care, right? Addressing, you know, food, clothing, shelter. I'm not gonna lie, I'm hungry in my apartment right now. You know, so I really like what Jack Clark mentioned about creating a department of public safety, and, you know, I'm gonna combine it with Dr. Shange's ideas of, you know, just offering that the UCPD building to community organizations, or, you know, our Department of Public Safety that can house all these different programs and initiatives that will, you know, ultimately address student safety. And I really want to highlight, you know, directing funds towards student services like retention projects, towards recruitment of Black students. I think that's really important. Like at UCLA, Black students have the lowest graduation rates, particularly Black males, and a lot of that has to do with the lack of support that we see from administration. So I think all of these things, you know, I guess that could be more of a long-term thing, because I know that requires fundraising and things like that. But, you know, I think, you know, we have to think about what's possible and how we can make that happen. Because, I mean, I'm just thinking about, like, a couple of years ago for this UCLA Centennial, they raised like $1 billion, right? For, you know, I'm not sure what the money went to, but, right, just the fundraising capabilities that the university has, we can really, you know, put that to use as a public university. And so I'll leave it at that.
So I've been wanting to get back to Nicole, and some of the panelists want to get back to Nicole, and questions in the Q&A want to get back to Nicole. So you're in demand, Nicole, but I told Martin he could go next because he had a hand up. So let's just take Martin, then we'll be to you. Okay, Nicole.
Thank you, Louis. I'll be brief. Dr. Shange, I really appreciate your comments and your ideas. I think they're valid. It gives me pause, though, because at UC Merced, if we abolish the police, I would inherit Merced City Police and Merced County Sheriff, and that would actually cause some unintended consequences for us at UC Merced. We have a really good partnership with our UC Merced Police. They help us, you know, address issues of like Title IX cases, students of concern cases. We just developed a really close partnership. And if we implemented some of your ideas immediately, like by September 1st, it might cause other problems for the Black community and students of color at UC Merced. They're not perfect, but I prefer them over Merced City and Merced County Police. And I'll let Nicole speak right now.
Thanks.
Well, thank you. This has been such a great discussion. I've just enjoyed everybody's points. I think I'll just say around the mental health issue, in the short term, I definitely think a mental health team that goes out and responds to crises makes the most sense. It's been done in a lot of places. It can have a lot of integrity. I mean, but I don't want to romanticize healthcare. I mean, these systems of oppression are everywhere. So healthcare has its own systems of oppression, and health inequity is a real thing. So appropriate training, response, accountability is needed in the healthcare system. In my mind, we do as much damage by undertreating, mistreating, criminalizing mental health issues as anybody else. So I don't want to misname that. But in the short term, I definitely think this notion of the way that we've criminalized mental health behaviors and we stigmatize mental health as a problem and think about traumatic responses as problematic and worth punishing is a problem from when kids are little all the way to in senior circumstances, and mostly students and mostly people of color. So, I mean, the data is very clear on that. But I will say in this circumstance, to further traumatize rather than treat does no good. I mean, that's just the reality. On a longer term issue, if we're really thinking, I really appreciated Savannah's opening with like, what does safety look and feel like? Going to a world where people feel safe and secure is a mental health response. It actually is a response to criminalization because we know hurt people, you know? So to give people basic needs, to address oppression and dismantle it over time in all of these incremental ways that have been talked about are really the solution to this. And you can see that in so many ways. I think we started a UC with at least implementing alternatives to police being the response to mental health care. De-escalating and de-escalating crises, even in responses to police crashes, which is really about a trauma, the police show up as opposed to clinicians to support who was just in a police accident, in a car accident or whatever. So there's lots that we can do to wrap around care to support people and prioritize health and well-being. In the longer term, addressing the systemic racism and oppression is going to be in mental health intervention, no question, for people of color and for white folks. You know, this dismantling is a really, really systemic issue. And I mean, I couldn't say it better than the folks on this panel, but I definitely think longer term, we have to think about the implication of oppressing people and what that does to the traumatized, but also the traumatizers. I mean, really and truly, this is what dismantling this would look like, and trying to get people, because it makes me question always when I think about mental health, like who's really ill and who's really well? Is it the person receiving the trauma really ill, or is the person traumatizing really ill? And those are really hard questions to answer in the circumstance that we have. But for me, it starts with at least putting the people with the most training to do some good and to treat people as opposed to further traumatize.
Nicole, one of the questions that was asked for you, especially for you, had to do with if there was divestment and there were resources going to say CAPS. What would you do if you could imagine more resources? What would you do with it?
Yeah, well, this mental health team would have to be additional. The people that, I mean, I can't take on, we can't handle the folks that are coming into treatment. So we'd have to have a mental health team of clinicians to be able to provide 24-hour response in a coordinated way with LCSWs and LMFTs and psychologists who can go out across the system. You know, to deploy this, you know, and our systems are not just students, there's K through 12, there's preschoolers, there's extension students and healthcare workers and staff and faculty. To change the way we think about how we're responding to crises in the moment would take a huge investment. On top of that, those are just people responding to crises. The mental health prevention and education and well-being response, and thinking about community intervention and working with communities of color, and thinking about the implications of oppression, and thinking about how to do this in a more equitable and less traumatizing way is a whole other level of intervention that's focused on resilience and well-being and anti-racism all mixed together. And it really requires all of our health system to change our models. So on a smaller level, I think it's individual clinicians. On another level, it's the way that we orient in and think about how faculty think about students, how staff think about students, and how students think about other students at a whole other level.
So assuming you had resources for that, do you have a model for that big step?
I mean, we'd have to start with the model we're thinking about, at least at UCLA, is putting together this, we're calling it crisis evaluation and response in the field team as a pilot initially. And then longer term, I think we're gonna, I mean, we've already been thinking about and starting with what is the education that we need to do to build a real continuum of care for students who need to think about mental health and well-being as a daily practice, all of those, all the way to significant crisis intervention and care. And to me, that is more we're not there yet to form that level of intervention. We don't have the resources yet, but if we did, that's what I would build.
I just want to address, I think, Martin, your question is, your concern is 3,000,000% correct. We've all bad faith implementation of community demands. That's like, okay, you want this? Sure, do it with no money and no support tomorrow, right? And we don't want that to happen in the situation. And the way that we've done this, and also one of the Q&As that asked about, okay, well, you want to default to the Berkeley PD who pulled over, rolled up with 6 cars on Kirby. And so I think the biggest piece in terms of the George Floyd resolution in OUSD was taking that gap of time between the last day, between the decision to remove officers and their last day on campus, really taking that time to build a strong and multi-tiered response plan, right? And really boiling down, when do we actually need in this moment, right now, as a public institution, police on campus? When do you actually call police? And it boiled down to, there is someone who is dead right now on this campus. There is a bomb threat that is credible. We think there's a bomb on this campus right now. There's been a drive-by shooting right now. But these are the situations that after going through all the community resources, you're like, right now, we don't have the capacity to deal with someone who has died today, right? And that's very real. And that means that everything else, right, we're able to tier into a site-based response, which has to do with exactly what Nicole is saying, skilling up people who are already there, who are closest to the moment, who already know these students, who are already on campus, from our residential staff to folks on campus. And then the second piece is building in non-emergency lines, right? So one is the non-emergency police line. So doing things like reporting. You still need to report a theft. It's insurance stuff. No one needs to come out for that. It can be a Google form. You don't need to come over here. We can just tell you in a form, doesn't need a sworn officer at all. Then there's response teams that are based in communities. So response teams around mental health that are in there, that are right now, there's a couple. There's the mental health response unit that's being developed out of community for adult mental health crises. And there's also a partnership that's developing with Children's Hospital, trying to think about how, if we ask pediatricians and child psychiatrists, how can we get children from school to the hospital safely without re-traumatizing them with police? And just, I know this is high profile, Yale just lost a student to suicide recently. How we engage people in terms of mental health is also can be very carceral, even with no police involved. The fact that it can be hard to say that you're in a very difficult place without being hospitalized immediately against your will is also a kind of carcerality that limits people's ability to stay here with us among the living and their ability to do their best as students. And so I'm thinking about non-carceral responses to mental health, which includes funding TAPs and creating more than one avenue to wellness and health, right? So that CAPS doesn't have to bear all that load, right? That model is really individually focused and super good at engaging people over long term who are consenting to the treatment, right? And are there other ways of creating safety for students who are in crisis by meeting their basic needs and also bringing in community-based harm reductive forces, things like that.
Can I add one thing? This is something because at Berkeley, since 2014, all of this abolition as students, we've done it. It was in 2014 when I was 19 years old, I was screaming that I need mental health resources and no one listened. It was also the chief of police when Ted Agu was on the football field having a heart attack who said, do not call services. So people in the University of California are very much so well aware of concretely the step-by-step, the program that is needed. We've been talking about this since 2014. And that's why I say in the UC, please collaborate with Berkeley. There have been many behind the door conversations that they had with Black students that we felt they were in good faith executing on. 2021, they acting like they ain't never heard of it. Acting like we never came in 2014. Acting like we never had Ferguson to Cal. And so I'm here as an 8-year veteran in this struggle that y'all have the resources. And it is FUPOA, the police union, who has to be just as committed to this change, because there are powerful Black people, professional staff workers throughout the UC who is delivering justice and who is delivering resources to students every day. But there is administration and there are union officials who don't give a damn, who are literally, you got Black staff, students, community collaborating together at Berkeley. I mean, you should see the work that we do at this university. And then we go up to the very majority white power structure, the board, the cabinet, and they'd be like, oh, well, I think we need to hire a consultant first to further legitimate this claim. We're not playing these games no more, especially after my grandmother just passed in November 2020. And I was really reflecting, what was I doing where I couldn't really be active for her? I was helping the University of California be better to actually prevent 5 deaths from happening again. That's why I say Elgin Stafford, Tedda Gu, Malik Nixon, Bryson Young, Salam Akor, you will not disrespect my ancestors by saying we don't have the solution to plan or anything. So, you know, it starts today, and freedom don't cost $1. And so at Berkeley, we have conversations saying, yeah, we can't really get change right now because we don't got the budget. Disciplinary power is free. Rank and file membership of the FUPOA, actually engaging with community, is free. So that's just like my parting words, because abolition is resurging. But before we had this word, before we had cops off campus, 2014 Black Student Union was been telling y'all. 2016 African Black Coalition gave you the numbers on back in the 1980s, how the University of California invested in private prisons. And that is the reason why today the University of California has no Black students in it. So we're playing these games, and Prop 16 did not pass. So what is the plan now? Is it another task force? Is a rank and file union official going to be in that conversation? And there is a whole campus department that is not helping to make this whole university work. Like I said, there are Black staff and faculty and community who are literally saving this university, while there are other people, not gonna name names, who get by, who can just go home and collect the check at the end of the day and say that they serve the University of California. When I know staff members who work overtime to make sure that Black students are paid, who are safe. And so there's some inequities in terms of labor and compensation. And I'm saying this as someone who's been in this work for so long, that there are people in the University of California Police Department who will sit and watch us pontificate about the alternatives to policing and not say a thing, and will not contribute to the implementation, and will waste youth energy to the point where young Black students don't get their bachelors trying to make this university better. And so those are the games I'm speaking to Black student activists. I don't want you getting caught up in it. All of these staff people on this board, take their names down and follow up with them. You see Jack Clark, he's an education law attorney. Write his name down, right? Because that is the work. Because as Black people in the state of California, right? Dr. Shirley Weber just started her reparations board. We need resources delivered to our communities without compromise. And that we need to actually have a plan to educate Black people in the state of California. And we need to make a tangible investment. And if we're not really having that conversation about reparations, and also having a conversation about the legacy of hostile campus climate and the violations to the Equal Education and Opportunity Act of 1974, because of this excessive policing and this excessive force onto the Black student population, then we're really not having a conversation. So I just wanted to leave those final thoughts, because, you know, again, I just finished my dissertation. Hopefully I'm filing, I'm out of here, I'm moving on with my life. Like I said, I come from Vallejo, California, where the real work does need to be done. There are killer police departments in the state of California, and I don't want to see UCPD be one of those. And so there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and I want all hands on deck. And so I'm really happy to hear about the people in Merced, LA, doing the work. I'm so happy for Cops Off Campus, you know, coming up. But I do want to let the administration know you all have had meetings since 2014 with students who have been asking for these specific things. So this is not a new issue to y'all. Students have been asking for audits, right, about the essential safety services that UCPD provides. We've been asking about vice enforcement. We've been asking about residential service calls. So, you know, really it's time to get active and to execute the real change, because since Prop 16 did not pass, I actually do fear that if we just talk up here about police abolition and all of that, which I love, the university is going to have another 20 years of not educating Black people in the state. And so that's what I'm kind of concerned about.
Kirby, thank you so much. This brings the panel to an end, unfortunately. Wish we could keep going. If you look on the agenda, it says summary and reflection activity. I don't think I've ever felt more inadequate to provide a summary in my life. So I think I'm just going to observe the obvious, which is I think what we've heard today is that there's been a lot of talk and task force and training. The desire, the appetite is clearly for action, not more talking as far as that goes. And that's going to have to be what gets done in the next 6 months. Someone else is going to be talking about, President Drake, about the next steps. But really what we're hearing is a call for fundamental change. And the reflection activity that Lisa is going to engage us in right now to try and get some sense of where all of our participants are at that weren't able to participate in the actual panel discussions. I'm going to turn over to Lisa to do that.
Okay, so I would also wish that we had more time for that panel as well. Really want to thank all of you for contributing to this discussion, your insights and your really powerful comments and expressions. This is a very emotional topic, and I just want to thank you for participating. So, and by the way, there was a comment in the Q&A, which is, and I quote, "Y'all are fire." So thank you, panelists, again, for your participation. So yes, we would now like to close out our panels and the discussions for the day. And we would now like to invite you to reflect upon all that has been shared. Today, you've heard from the chair of the Regents, the president of the University of California, and through multiple panels, you've heard from graduate students, undergraduate students, faculty, staff, campus task force members, and special guests. As a result of all of that, we would like to now provide this final opportunity for you to pull together your culminating thoughts in response to today's symposium and the discussion. And we're going to do that by having you participate in a poll. So please get out your cell phones or your mobile devices to participate. I will give you a minute to grab your cell phones, and then I will be sharing the instructions on screen on how to participate. So you are going to be texting to this number, and the number is 22333. Again, that's 22333. And in the body of the text, you must enter Lisa G635. Once you send your text, you're going to receive a response to that indicating that you have joined the session. And then I'm going to be providing you with the question that you're going to respond to. So I'll just give you about 30 seconds more to join the session. And then I will go to our first question. And by the way, there's going to be two questions in this polling and reflection activity. So here is our first question. What is the most fundamental change that needs to be made to campus safety and policing? Thank you, everyone, for sharing your thoughts. I could watch the responses to this all day. This is really an excellent response. Thank you for that. We have to move to our next question. So I want you to please pause for a moment as we get ready for the next question. And that next question is, what about you? What about you? You are an important part of the equation. So I want to ask you personally, what are you going to do or change as a result of today's discussion or symposium? What are you going to do or change as a result of today's discussion or symposium? Please share your thoughts. Okay, again, I could watch this all day. I just want to thank everyone for your sincerity in expressing your thoughts and feelings, a wide range of thoughts and feelings and emotions around this very important topic. I want to also thank everyone just for your participation not only in this poll and these two scrolling polls as they continue. I do have to stop now. But I just want to tell you that it's been an honor and privilege to co-facilitate this symposium along with my colleague, Lewis Michelson. I want to thank you for your participation and joining us in this journey in reimagining campus safety. And now it is my distinct pleasure to reintroduce you to President Michael V. Drake for the next steps of change and his closing remarks. President Drake.
Thank you very much, Lisa and Lewis, and to everyone who participated today. And I really do want to thank everyone for your thoughtful ideas and your active participation. This is a broad discussion. As Lewis said, it's really after the energy and perspectives we heard today, it's very hard to summarize the threads. There are multiple threads that we heard, some supportive of each other, some were in fact in conflict with each other. That's the nature of a discussion. We have a very large community. We are a community of 500,000 people. I think on an issue like this, we would have many thousands of opinions, and we again appreciate those who shared their opinions, their perspectives, their experiences, their research with us today. Also want to thank those who shared their solutions. You know, the reason for having the symposium, reason for bringing everyone together was to get ideas, to get guidance, to learn about how we might move forward to be a more perfect, university, to try to be a better university. And, you know, we never can reach perfection. We never can be ideal, but we can always move in that direction. So I appreciate the earnest efforts toward bringing to the table things that will help us to move toward being a better university. I also was struck today, I guess, with a couple of things. One is the university exists within our communities, which exists within our country, which exists within our worlds. We're not separate from or better or worse than the world we live in or the communities we live in. We are part of those communities, and we have in some circumstances the specific enterprises, the specific institutions that we have on our campuses and in our campus community. But many times these reflect and are part of the things that affect our larger world. And so as we look at the issues that we addressed today, two, I'll think of one, our fellow citizens who are in mental health crisis and how we deal with people who are in mental health crisis. Our people of color, Black and Brown and Indigenous and other marginalized people. We've seen in just the past weeks attacks on Asian members of our community. As we think about those people within our campus community, we know that those issues also exist across the street from our campus and in our broader cities, and we have to work in ways to address these issues, the issues of oppression and systemic racism that exist throughout our society. And we can't fix it on campus and have it not fixed in the world and have everything be okay. That's not a solution. It really is us working together to try to make our community safer and better for all of us. I think that's a theme that I at least heard today. Another theme that I heard today was the importance of having data, the challenge of having data that are clear and transparent, so we can know what's happening, where things are happening, how we can direct our services and our focus toward areas that are necessary, having information about what actually is happening and how it's happening will be very important. So we're thinking very much about that. As we saw with the word cloud and the streaming of ideas, there are multiple other ideas that came. And again, I want to thank everyone for bringing your ideas, your experience, your research, your background to the discussion, bringing solutions to the table. We appreciate that very much. The next several months will be gathering this information and leading forward to recommendations that we hope to be able to make for the next steps by the summer. So we will begin digesting and gathering information we received today, think about this in time for our reports as we're going forward. And then the aim by the summer is to have directions that we will share with the campuses about the places that we think that they can go. I also didn't mention this earlier, but I want to thank the people who organized the symposium, people here in this office and the people across the campuses who gathered information and sent it to us, the task forces and boards and staff and faculty and students, all of whom gathered information to send to help us put this symposium on. Again, gathering all that information, evaluating the data we have and looking for where that points us will be our next steps. So I think that's, I want to finish where I began by really thanking everyone for their participation. This is a journey. This was the latest step in a journey, and we will continue on together. Thank you very much.